let the day fade away. Settle into your bed or favorite chair, lower the lights, and let's take a slow journey into the past. If you're enjoying these sleep stories, feel free to give us a like or subscribe, but no pressure at all. Now, let's start our journey. Paris, 1900. The City of Lights was gearing up for an event so grand that even the Eiffel Tower, still a relative newcomer to the skyline, would have to tip its hat. Enter the Exposition Universelle, a world's fair so massive it could have given modern-day Disneyland a run for its money. And while there were plenty of technological marvels on display, like diesel engines and the moving sidewalk, yes, that's right, a moving sidewalk, eat your heart out, airport terminals, the real piece de resistance was something far less glamorous, and far more troubling, the seeds of what would become the infamous human zoo. But let's rewind a bit and set the scene. World's fairs were the Coachella of their time, an absolute must-see. They were essentially global show-and-tell sessions where countries could flaunt their latest and greatest achievements. These expos were fueled by a potent cocktail of nationalism, capitalism, and good old-fashioned curiosity. The 1900 Paris Exposition, for instance, attracted over 50 million visitors. That's nearly the population of present-day South Korea, in case you were counting. The Paris Fair wasn't just about gadgets and gizmos. It also had a heavy dose of what many at the time would have called exoticism. Colonial powers, with their empires sprawling across continents, had a penchant for displaying their far-flung conquests. This wasn't just casual tourism, folks. It was imperialism with a side of voyeurism. And boy, did the French go all out. They recreated entire villages with real people from their colonies, like a live-action version of a National Geographic spread, minus the ethical considerations. The idea was simple, yet horrifying. Why just read about the other side of the world when you could stroll through a mock village, complete with actual residents from Algeria, Madagascar, or Indochina? It was like a twisted form of armchair travel, except instead of postcards, you got people. The fair organizers didn't just want visitors to see the colonies, they wanted them to feel like they were walking through them without the pesky inconvenience of actually going there. Now, who were the masterminds behind these spectacles? Meet the key players, the French government, the colonial administration, and a slew of businessmen who saw nothing but dollar signs, or francs rather. They were motivated by a mix of patriotic pride and economic opportunity. Colonialism, after all, was as much about the bottom line as it was about the flag. By showing off the riches and peoples of their colonies, they aimed to justify the empire's existence to the French public and investors. And, of course, there was a darker side to this colonial show and tell. The human exhibits were presented not just as curiosities, but as living proof of the supposed superiority of European civilization. The message was clear. Look at these exotic people in their primitive ways, and be thankful for the civilizing hand of the empire. It was a narrative that played well in the press and among the visitors who flocked to these exhibits like moths to a flame. But let's pivot for a moment and talk money, because if there's one thing that history teaches us, it's that economics drives change. The Exposition Universelle had a staggering budget of 120 million francs, which, adjusted for inflation, would make even the most extravagant Hollywood blockbuster blush. The fair was a financial juggernaut, with vendors and exhibitors keen to cash in on the influx of visitors. It was like a 1900s version of a tech startup boom, only with more pith helmets and fewer hoodies. This economic backdrop is crucial to understanding why the human zoo phenomenon took root. The colonial exhibits weren't just about bragging rights or cultural exchange, they were about cold, hard cash. The colonies were marketed as fertile grounds for investment, rich in resources and opportunities. By putting them on display, the organizers hoped to spark interest and, ultimately, financial investment. It was a sales pitch wrapped in spectacle, and a deeply problematic one at that. So, what's the takeaway here? The Paris Exposition of 1900 wasn't just a fair, it was a reflection of an era's obsession with progress, power, and profit. It was a time when the lines between entertainment and exploitation blurred, when the drive to showcase the world's diversity was tainted by a paternalistic and, frankly, racist worldview. The seeds sown in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower would grow into the human zoos of the early 20th century. A grim reminder that not all that glitters is gold, and that beneath the surface of history's grandest spectacles often lies a more unsettling truth. And that, my friends, is where we'll leave it for now. Stay tuned, because the story only gets more bizarre and more disturbing from here. Speaking of bizarre and disturbing, let's fast forward a few years to the 1905 Colonial Exhibition in Paris, which was essentially the Exposition Universelle's more controversial sequel. Think of it as the Empire Strikes Back of world fairs, minus the lightsabers and intergalactic battles, but with all the drama and questionable ethics. This event wasn't just another notch on the belt of French imperial pageantry. It was a full-on spectacle that drew over 30 million visitors. That's right, 30 million curious souls, all eager to witness the so-called wonders of the French Empire without the bother of passports or malaria shots. Now, this wasn't some half-baked backyard carnival. No, sir. The 1905 Colonial Exhibition was meticulously choreographed to showcase France's colonial might and cultural largesse. It wasn't just a walk in the park, it was a stroll through a carefully curated illusion of power and progress. The organizers didn't just throw together a few tents and call it a day. They went all out, constructing elaborate mock villages, each meticulously designed to represent regions from across the French colonies. We're talking about full-scale replicas complete with indigenous inhabitants who were, quite literally, put on display like living dioramas. It's like if Madame Tussauds decided to go all in on live action and the results were as ethically questionable as they sound. So let's break it down. Why was this a big deal? Well, for starters, it was a colossal operation. Imagine the logistics of shipping people from Algeria, Madagascar, or Indochina to Paris, along with the paraphernalia to recreate their homes and lifestyles. This wasn't a simple vacation. It was an imperialistic endeavor wrapped in the guise of cultural education. The planners had a singular goal, to paint a picture of colonial harmony and development. Of course, the reality was much less picturesque, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The exhibition was a masterclass in imperial propaganda. Each village was designed to be an immersive experience, minus the reality check. Visitors could wander through a Senegalese village, marvel at the traditional dances, and then mosey over to an Indo-Chinese market, all without leaving the comfort of Paris. It was an all-you-can-eat buffet of exoticism, served with a side of paternalism. The underlying message was as clear as a neon sign. Look at the wonders of the French colonies, and see how much they've benefited under our benevolent rule. But here's where it gets even more twisted. The people on display weren't just cultural ambassadors, they were living, breathing exhibits. Many of them were coerced or outright forced to participate, often promised wages that didn't materialize or conditions that were far from humane. Imagine being plucked from your home, shipped across the sea, and then expected to perform your culture for strangers day in and day out. It's the ultimate fishbowl existence. Except the bowl is a European metropolis, and the viewers are armed with colonial biases. Economically, the exhibition was a goldmine for the organizers. The sheer number of attendees meant a massive influx of revenue, not only from ticket sales, but from the commercial enterprises that sprouted up around the event. Merchants and entrepreneurs pounced on the opportunity to hawk everything from souvenirs to snacks, all capitalizing on the colonial curiosity. It was capitalism meeting colonialism in a dance as old as time, where the real winners were the ones holding the purse strings. Yet, despite the financial success, the human cost was staggering. The individuals on display were often treated more like artifacts than people. They were subjected to the gawking eyes of visitors and the relentless scrutiny of a society that saw them as novelties rather than equals. This wasn't just cultural exchange, it was exploitation dressed up in a fancy hat with a ticket price to boot. And let's not forget the political undercurrents. The exhibition wasn't just a celebration of empire, it was a strategic move to bolster support for the colonial project. By showcasing the supposed benefits of French rule, the organizers aimed to silence critics and rally public opinion behind the colonial enterprise. It was a spectacle designed to distract from the harsher realities of imperial rule, the rebellions, the exploitation, the moral ambiguities. But here's the kicker. While the exhibition painted a rosy picture of colonial life, The reality was far more complex and often bleak. For the people who found themselves on display, this was no glamorous gig. It was a stark reminder of the power dynamics that defined the era. They were cast as supporting players in a narrative they didn't write, with little control over how they were portrayed or perceived. So, as we look back on the 1905 colonial exhibition, it's essential to recognize it for what it was, a grand illusion, meticulously crafted to sell an idealized vision of empire while glossing over the uncomfortable truths. It was a moment when the lines between education and exploitation blurred, leaving a legacy that's as troubling as it is telling. And with that, we'll pause here, leaving this chapter of history open like a book with too many pages yet to be turned. There's more to unpack, more layers to peel back, and more stories that demand to be told. Stay with me, because this journey through time is far from over, and the past has plenty more secrets to reveal. Let's dive right back into the heart of Paris in 1905, where the buzz of the colonial exhibition wasn't just the talk of the town, it was the talk of the continent. Paris was abuzz with chatter, and newspapers were practically salivating at the chance to cover this spectacle. But here's the kicker. The way the media spun this story was as eye-popping as the exhibition itself. First off, let's talk about the press coverage. Newspapers of the time were the social media of their day, a whirlwind of sensational headlines and glossy illustrations. The French papers were no different. They gushed over the exhibition like it was the latest blockbuster, all while conveniently sidestepping the ethical quagmire at its core. Reports were peppered with phrases like exotic splendor and a pilgrimage to the heart of the empire, selling the event as both a cultural odyssey and a national triumph. The French press were the ultimate hype men, and boy did they have a way with words. But behind the florid descriptions lay a more calculated agenda. The media was complicit in pushing the narrative that the colonies were not just possessions but jewels in the French imperial crown. This wasn't just accidental bias, it was a deliberate spin job. The propaganda machine was in full swing, cranking out stories that painted the colonies as lands of opportunity and adventure, conveniently glossing over the less glamorous aspects of imperial rule, like, exploitation and subjugation. And let's not ignore the role of social Darwinism in all this. Social Darwinism, the pseudo-scientific theory that twisted Darwin's ideas into a justification for imperialism. It suggested that the European races were superior and destined to civilize the rest of the world. Talk about a convenient excuse for empire building. This ideology was all over the exhibition, like a bad cologne you couldn't shake off. It permeated the exhibits, seeped into the media coverage, and became the unspoken justification for the entire charade. Newspaper articles often featured pseudo-anthropological sketches and reports, claiming to provide scientific insights into the racial hierarchy. These pieces were written with the same confidence as a weather forecast, but with twice the inaccuracy. They were basically the 105 version of clickbait, designed to capture public interest while reinforcing social Darwinist ideas. The press, knowingly or not, became the megaphone for these troubling ideologies, amplifying them to the masses. Now, you might be wondering, how did the general public react to this media blitz? With wide-eyed wonder and disturbingly little skepticism, it turns out. The exhibition was a smash hit, drawing over 30 million visitors, a number that would make even the Louvre envious. These attendees weren't just passive observers, they were active participants in a spectacle that reinforced their worldview. They bought into the myth of benevolent colonialism, hook, line and sinker, all while munching on pastries and snapping up souvenirs. But let's take a moment to peel back this romantic veneer. While the exhibition was pitched as an educational experience, it was more akin to a colonial theme park. Visitors weren't just learning about other cultures, they were consuming them. They wandered through these mock villages like they were strolling through a zoo, gawking at the inhabitants who were presented as living artifacts. It was cultural voyeurism, dressed up in the guise of enlightenment. And here's where things get even more twisted. The public's fascination was both a product and a promoter of the exhibition's underlying ideologies. The more they marveled at the exotic displays, the more they bought into the narrative of European superiority. It was a self-perpetuating cycle of ignorance and arrogance, one that the organizers were all too happy to fuel. The economic backdrop of this spectacle also played a significant role in shaping public perception. The exhibition wasn't just a cultural showcase, it was an economic juggernaut. Vendors, entrepreneurs and investors flocked to the event, eager to cash in on the colonial fever. They peddled everything from trinkets to travel packages, turning the colonies into commodities. The financial success of the exhibition further legitimized the colonial project in the eyes of the public. Of course, there were dissenting voices, though they were often drowned out by the celebratory clamour. Intellectuals, activists, and a few journalists tried to expose the darker side of the exhibition, calling it out for the exploitative farce it was. But their cries were largely ignored, overshadowed by the spectacle's grandeur and the media's complicity. It was a David versus Goliath battle, and Goliath had a megaphone. As we look back on this chapter of history, it's crucial to recognize the role of media and propaganda in shaping public perception. The 1905 colonial exhibition wasn't just a display of imperial might. It was a masterclass in narrative control. It showed how easily spectacle can obscure reality, how quickly myths can become accepted truths. So, as we wrap up this part of the story, let's remember that history is often written by those who shout the loudest. The colonial exhibitions were more than a display of empire. They were a reflection of the power dynamics and prejudices of their time. And while the story may seem distant, its echoes are closer than we think. But don't worry, we're not done yet. There's more to uncover, more layers to peel back, and more threads to unravel. Stick around, because this historical ride is far from over. The past has plenty of secrets left to reveal, and we're just getting started. And speaking of secrets, let's dive into the ones that rattled the cages of the 1905 colonial exhibition's seemingly impenetrable facade. While the fair was busy dazzling visitors with its glitzy veneer of imperial might, a chorus of dissenters was gearing up to rain on the parade. These folks were the real trailblazers, the ones who dared to point out that the emperor wasn't just naked, he was downright exploitative. First up in our rogues gallery of critics were the intellectual heavyweights. Think of them as the original social media influencers, but with quills instead of keyboards. This brainy bunch included the likes of Anatole France, an acclaimed French writer whose pen was mightier than the colonial sword. France and his ilk took to the newspapers and lecture halls, arguing that these exhibitions were less about cultural exchange and more about human degradation. They called out the human zoos for what they were, spectacles that stripped individuals of dignity and reduced them to mere curiosities for the masses. These critics weren't just throwing shade, they were hurling full-on intellectual thunderstorms. And it wasn't just the literati getting their feathers ruffled. The labour movement was also raising its collective voice, with trade unions and socialists calling foul on the exploitative nature of these exhibitions. They saw the colonial project as an extension of capitalist exploitation, where both the workers in the colonies and those on display were getting the short end of the stick. It was like a global game of Monopoly, where the colonial powers owned all the properties and everyone else was perpetually stuck on Baltic Avenue. But in this swirling vortex of dissent, let's not forget the ethical firebrands, the early human rights advocates who saw these exhibitions as a moral travesty. They argued that reducing people to exhibits was an affront to human dignity, a violation of the basic principles of equality and respect. Their voices rang out in pamphlets and public debates, cutting through the noise like a hot knife through butter. The backlash wasn't just local. Across the English Channel, British intellectuals and political figures joined the fray, condemning the exhibitions as a blight on European culture. Even in the United States, where racial segregation was the norm, some newspapers and activists questioned the morality of these human displays. It was a classic case of people in glass houses syndrome, but it showed that the unease with these spectacles wasn't confined to France alone. Despite the outcry, the wheels of the colonial machine kept turning, fueled by an insatiable appetite for profit and power. Yet, the seeds of skepticism were sown, and they would take root in the public consciousness over the coming decades. It was a slow burn, but the dissenters had lit a fire that wouldn't easily be extinguished. Now, let's fast forward to the decades that followed. The Roaring Twenties brought more than just jazz and flappers. They ushered in a wave of social change that began to challenge the old order. The world was still grappling with the aftermath of World War I, a conflict that had shaken the foundations of empires and left millions questioning the wisdom of imperial grandeur. As societies around the globe began to rebuild and redefine themselves, the appeal of colonial exhibitions started to wane. The gleaming allure of empire was losing its sheen, replaced by a growing awareness of the injustices it entailed. Public opinion was shifting, like a tide turning against the moon's pull. The post-war period saw a rise in anti-colonial sentiment as independence movements gained momentum across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. The voices of colonized peoples were growing louder, demanding self-determination and equality. Meanwhile, the intellectual elite continued to chip away at the foundations of colonial ideology. Scholars, writers, and artists began to explore themes of identity, race, and power in their work, challenging the narratives that had propped up imperialism for so long. The human zoos that once drew crowds by the millions were increasingly seen as relics of a bygone era, out of step with the modern world's evolving values. By the mid-20th century, the decline of these exhibitions was in full swing. The world fairs continued, but the human zoos were phased out, their ethical implications finally deemed too egregious to ignore. The rise of new media, radio, film, and eventually television provided people with different ways to encounter the world, ones that didn't rely on the dehumanization of others. Yet the legacy of the colonial exhibitions lingered, like a shadow cast by a fading sun. They left behind a complex tapestry of cultural exchange and exploitation, one that modern societies are still unraveling today. The echoes of those human zoos can be heard in contemporary debates about representation, ethics, and the commodification of culture. So, as we close this chapter and prepare to open another, let's remember the lessons of history's grandest spectacles. They remind us that progress is often a double-edged sword, that the line between enlightenment and exploitation can be perilously thin. But most importantly, they show us that the voices of dissent, the ones who dare to question the status quo, are the true catalysts for change. And there you have it, folks. We've peeled back another layer of history's complex onion, but there's still more to uncover. Stick around as we continue to explore the twists and turns of this intricate tale, because the past has plenty more secrets to spill, and we're just getting started. And so here we are, standing on the precipice of history's shadow, peering into the long-term impact of these human zoos. Picture it like this. The 20th century was a wild, unpredictable roller coaster, and the human zoos were those unsettling dips that left everyone feeling a bit queasy. They didn't just disappear into the ether, they left behind a complex legacy that continues to echo through the corridors of time. For the individuals who found themselves unwilling participants in these spectacles, the experience was life-altering, and not in the "I just won £1,000,000 kind of way. Most of them returned to their homelands with stories that were far from the glamorous tales spun by the exhibition organizers. Many faced stigmatization and alienation upon their return. Imagine being treated as a novelty in your own community, a living reminder of imperial exploitation. It's like coming back from a supposed dream vacation, only to find out your luggage was lost, except the luggage is your dignity. And let's not forget the psychological scars. For many, the experience of being displayed like an artifact had a profound impact, one that didn't fade with the closing ceremonies. It was a stark reminder of their perceived inferiority in the eyes of the colonizers, a message reinforced by the gawking visitors and the dehumanizing narratives spun around them. The echoes of this trauma reverberated through generations, shaping identities and sowing seeds of distrust toward colonial powers. But the impact didn't stop with the individuals. It seeped into the societies that hosted these grim spectacles. The human zoos played a significant role in reinforcing racial stereotypes, painting a picture of non-European peoples as primitive and exotic. These exhibitions were like the original bad reality TV shows, complete with caricatures and one-dimensional portrayals that left little room for nuance or understanding. They helped entrench societal biases and foster a sense of superiority among the European populace. This sense of superiority wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It became a cornerstone of colonial ideology, one that justified the subjugation and exploitation of other races. The human zoos weren't just about entertainment, they were a tool for shaping public perception, a way to make the colonial project palatable to the masses. By presenting colonized peoples as curiosities, the exhibitions served to dehumanize them, making it easier for the public to ignore the brutal realities of imperial rule. The economic context can't be ignored either. These events were cash cows, no doubt about it. The organizers raked in profits, while the exhibitors and vendors cashed in on the exotic allure. It was capitalism on steroids, where human lives were simply another commodity to be exploited for financial gain. The success of these exhibitions further legitimized the colonial enterprise, reinforcing the idea that imperialism was not only profitable, but also culturally enriching for the European public. Fast forward to today, and we find ourselves grappling with the long shadows cast by these spectacles. The racial stereotypes they helped cement are still with us, lurking in the dark corners of society like unwelcome guests at a dinner party. We're talking about stereotypes that continue to shape everything from immigration policies to pop culture, manifesting in ways that are both subtle and overt. It's like trying to shake off a stubborn stain that just won't budge. The struggle to reconcile this history with modern values is ongoing, a tug-of-war between acknowledging past mistakes and striving for a more inclusive future. It's a balancing act that requires us to confront uncomfortable truths, to peel back the layers of romanticized narratives and expose the harsh realities beneath. The human zoos remind us that progress isn't always linear, that the path to understanding is often littered with the debris of past injustices. But here's where it gets tricky. While it's easy to point fingers at the past and waggle them disapprovingly, we must also recognize the appeal of these myths. They offered a sense of adventure and discovery, a chance to glimpse the unknown without ever leaving the comfort of home. It's the same allure that draws people to watch nature documentaries or travel shows today. Yet, the difference lies in the intent and the impact. Two crucial factors that separate enlightenment from exploitation. So, where does that leave us? With a big, messy knot of history that defies easy solutions. We've come a long way since the days of the human zoos, but there's still a long road ahead. The lessons of the past serve as cautionary tales, reminding us of the dangers of reducing human lives to mere spectacles. They challenge us to build a world that values diversity and celebrates difference, rather than exploiting it for profit or entertainment. In the end, the story of the human zoos is a microcosm of the broader human experience, one filled with contradictions, complexities, and the constant struggle for understanding. It's a reminder that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a living, breathing entity that continues to shape our present and future. As we reflect on these lessons, let's strive to be the dissenting voices of our time, the ones who dare to question, to challenge, and to push for a world where dignity and respect are not just ideals, but realities. And with that, we've reached the end of our journey through this unsettling chapter of history. But don't hang up your curiosity just yet. There's always more to discover, more layers to peel back, and more stories waiting to be told. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, history might be written in the past, but it's always whispering in our ears, urging us to listen, learn, and, most importantly, never stop asking questions. In the hustle and bustle of 1930s Atlanta, nestled in a neighborhood that was as tightly knit as a pair of Depression-era socks, was a young boy named Michael King Jr. Yes, you heard that right, Michael. It wasn't until later, in an inspired nod to the Protestant reformer, that his father changed both their names to Martin Luther. But for now, let's stick with Michael, because that's what his mother, Alberta, would have called him when he knocked over her favorite vase while playing indoors. Young Michael was growing up in the sweet symphony of a Southern Baptist household, where sermons were practically a second language, and faith was as unshakable as the red Georgia clay beneath their feet. Michael's father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a towering figure both physically and metaphorically. At around 6 feet tall, he was a man who commanded attention and respect, not just from the congregation at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where he preached, but from his family as well. It was here in the heart of the old Fourth Ward that the seeds of young Martin's future as a preacher and civil rights leader were sown. The church was a place where voices echoed like thunder and the air crackled with the electricity of conviction. Michael watched his father from the pews, absorbing the cadence and rhythm of sermons that were part spiritual guidance, part theatrical performance. While the myth might suggest he was born with a Bible in one hand and a speech in the other, the reality was a bit different. Young Michael was as susceptible to the jitters as any other kid thrust into the spotlight. His first attempts at public speaking were, to put it mildly, a comedy of errors. Picture a young boy standing awkwardly in front of a congregation, knees knocking like a pair of castanets as he tried to remember his lines. It's said that during one of his early speeches, he almost forgot his own name. But as they say, practice makes perfect, or at least it gets you to the point where you stop sweating through your Sunday best. The King family valued education like it was the Holy Grail. Michael's mother, Alberta, was a driving force behind his academic pursuits. She was a schoolteacher, and education was her domain. It was no surprise when young Michael skipped a couple of grades, heading off to Morehouse College at the tender age of 15. Morehouse wasn't just any college. It was the alma mater of prominent black men, a beacon of hope and a proving ground for future leaders. Here, under the tutelage of President Benjamin Mays, a man whose speeches could make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, Michael found a mentor who would shape his outlook on life and justice. College life wasn't all about books and lectures, though. Like any teenager, Michael had his fair share of misadventures. Rumour has it he once tried to join a dance club, only to discover that his feet had a mind of their own. Let's just say smooth moves were not yet part of his repertoire. But it was in these formative years that he began to refine his voice, both literally and figuratively. The nervous boy who nearly tripped over his own tongue began to transform into a confident orator, learning that words had the power to change minds and move mountains. During his time at Morehouse, Michael was also introduced to the works of Henry David Thoreau, whose essay on civil disobedience planted a seed that would later grow into a full-blown philosophy of non-violent resistance. It's an amusing thought to imagine the young king, book in hand, grappling with the idea that breaking the law could be a moral imperative, all while trying to pass his philosophy exams. And let's not forget the social and political climate of the time. The 1940s were a period of immense change and tension. World War II was raging across the globe, and at home the fight for civil rights was beginning to simmer like a pot on the verge of boiling over. In this era, to be a young black man in the South was to live in a world fraught with contradictions and challenges. Jim Crow laws were still very much in effect, and the fight for equality was a daily struggle. In this cauldron of social upheaval, Michael King Jr. began to come into his own. He graduated from Morehouse in 1948 with a degree in sociology, a field that would give him a profound understanding of the structures and systems that governed society, and by extension, the tools to challenge and change them. It was during this time that he decided to pursue a career in ministry, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, but with a vision that was uniquely his own. As we wrap up this chapter in the life of Martin Luther King Jr., it's worth noting that even legends have humble beginnings. The boy who once stumbled over his words would go on to deliver speeches that would echo through history. But for now, let's just appreciate the irony that one of the greatest orators the world has ever known started out as a nervous kid with a shaky voice and a big dream. And maybe that's the most inspiring part of all. And so, the story of Martin Luther King Jr. marches on from the boy with a shaky voice to the man whose words would shake the foundations of America. Fast forward a few years, and we find ourselves in Montgomery, Alabama, circa 1955, a year that would become a cornerstone in the civil rights narrative. The name of the game was buses, and if you were black, you were likely familiar with the indignity of giving up your seat to a white passenger. Enter Rosa Parks, who decided enough was enough on December 1st of that year. Her arrest for refusing to stand up on a segregated bus set off a chain of events that would propel King into the national spotlight. Montgomery might have seemed like an unlikely stage for this drama, but it was about to become the epicenter of a movement that would ripple across the nation. The Montgomery bus boycott wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment reaction, it was a calculated act of defiance, a 381-day marathon of determined resistance. Here's where King enters stage left. At just 26, he was the newly minted pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, barely a stone's throw from the Alabama state capitol. With youth on his side and a Ph.D. in systematic theology tucked under his belt, he was in many ways an ideal candidate to lead the boycott, articulate, educated, and frankly, relatively unknown. Sometimes anonymity is a blessing in disguise. King's speeches during the boycott were nothing short of galvanizing. He had a knack for turning a simple church hall into a theater of inspiration, using words like justice and freedom, as if they were weapons of mass construction. Let's not kid ourselves, though. These gatherings weren't exactly TED Talks. They were gritty, impromptu meetings often held in the face of intimidation and violence. But King's voice rose above the fear, his words acting as a balm for weary souls. In one of his early speeches, he famously declared, "We are determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." Now, that's the kind of line that makes you want to stand up and shout, "Amen," even if you're a die-hard atheist. Behind the scenes, the reality was far less glamorous. The city buses were losing up to 65% of their revenue during the boycott, a figure that would make any accountant break into a cold sweat. Still, not everyone was thrilled with King's ascendancy. Believe it or not, some of the older civil rights leaders viewed him with skepticism. Who was this upstart preacher who came out of nowhere with his fancy degree and his grand ideas? Perhaps it was envy, or maybe just the natural suspicion of anyone who seems to rise too quickly. But King was undeterred. He understood the power of narratives, and he was crafting one that couldn't be ignored. It's easy to romanticize the boycott as a seamless operation, but let's inject some reality here. Organizing carpools for thousands of people across a segregated city? That's logistical gymnastics. And don't forget, folks, this was before the era of Google Maps. Volunteers who drove had to navigate a labyrinthine system of backroads to avoid being stopped by the police, who were only too eager to issue tickets for any imagined infraction. Yet, despite the headaches and heartaches, the boycott held strong, and King's leadership was a critical factor in its success. But why, you might ask, did the Montgomery bus boycott matter so much? Beyond the obvious goal of desegregating public transit, it was a proving ground for non-violent civil disobedience, a strategy that would become the cornerstone of the civil rights movement. King was deeply influenced by Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence, and he saw it as a practical, moral, and effective way to challenge the status quo. Non-violence wasn't just a lofty ideal, it was a calculated strategy designed to expose the brutality of segregation to a national audience. And it worked. The boycott drew attention from media outlets across the country, turning King into a household name practically overnight. Yet, let's not sugarcoat things. The road was fraught with danger. King's home was bombed in January 1956, a not-so-subtle reminder that his newfound fame came with a target on his back. The incident could have sparked a violent retaliation, but King urged his followers to stay the course of non-violence, a decision that reinforced his credibility as a leader committed to peaceful change. It was a testament to his growing prowess as an orator and strategist that he could diffuse tensions even in the face of personal peril. As the boycott wore on, the stakes continued to rise. By November 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional, a decision that cracked the facade of Jim Crow laws. The boycott officially ended on December 20, 1956, marking a monumental victory for the civil rights movement. King was hailed as a hero, but he knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for equality was far from over, and the challenges ahead would make the Montgomery bus boycott look like a prelude. So there you have it. A young preacher thrust into the limelight, a community united in defiance, and a nation forced to reckon with its conscience. In a world where stories often get romanticized into neat packages, the Montgomery bus boycott stands as a reminder that real change is messy, complicated, and fraught with peril. King may have emerged as a charismatic leader, but he was also a man navigating the treacherous waters of social change, buoyed by a vision that extended far beyond the horizon. As we wrap up this chapter, let's keep in mind that the true measure of King's impact isn't just in the speeches he gave or the victories he won. It's in the way he inspired ordinary people to do extraordinary things, to stand up, sit down, and speak out for justice. And maybe, just maybe, it's in the way he taught us that even the most daunting challenges can be met with courage, conviction, and a little bit of Southern charm. Now, stay tuned for the next installment, where we'll delve deeper into the evolution of King's philosophy and the trials that would test his resolve. The journey is far from over, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. As Martin Luther King Jr. continued his journey, the stage was set for what would become the pinnacle of his influence, the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Now, if you think organizing a family barbecue is stressful, try coordinating a demonstration with over 250,000 participants from across the country. It was like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, except the peg was 250,000 people and the hole was the National Mall. The logistical nightmare was real, folks. Think less. Martin Luther King Jr. And more Martin Luther King Jr., party planner extraordinaire. The idea was bold, a massive demonstration right in the heart of the nation's capital, demanding civil and economic rights for African Americans. But let's not get carried away with romantic visions of unity and harmony. Behind the scenes, there was more chaos than a Black Friday sale. Coordinators had to mobilize hundreds of buses and trains, secure permits, and handle a deluge of media inquiries, all while keeping an eye out for potential violence. The FBI, under the watchful eye, or more accurately, the paranoid glare of J. Edgar Hoover, was convinced that communists were hiding under every rock, just waiting to wreak havoc. They were about as welcome as a skunk at a lawn party, and yet, somehow, they pulled it off. On August 28, 1963, the sun shone down on a sea of humanity gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial, each person a pebble in a tidal wave of change. It was a sight to behold, a living testament to the power of collective action. The event featured an all-star lineup of speakers and performers, including Mahalia Jackson and Bob Dylan. If ever there was a civil rights Woodstock, this was it. But the main act, of course, was Dr. King. Standing before the crowd, he delivered what would become one of the most iconic speeches in American history. "I Have a Dream" wasn't just a speech. It was a symphony of hope and defiance, a masterclass in oratory that still sends shivers down the spine. King spoke of a future where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, a line that has echoed through time like a clarion call for justice. Now, let's take a moment to debunk a little myth. Some folks like to imagine that King jotted down his speech on a napkin while sipping coffee at a diner, but the reality was far more meticulous. The speech was the product of weeks of collaboration with advisors, a carefully crafted piece designed to both inspire and provoke. Yet, in a twist of fate or divine inspiration, one of the most memorable parts of the speech was improvised. As King reached the end of his prepared text, Mahalia Jackson, standing nearby, urged him to "Tell them about the dream, Martin." And with that, King launched into the "I Have a Dream" segment, speaking from the heart in a way that would forever change the trajectory of civil rights. The media reaction was a mixed bag. On one hand, the press was full of praise, with newspapers like the New York Times calling it a milestone in the long and turbulent history of the civil rights movement. But not everyone was thrilled. Some critics dismissed the event as naive or overly idealistic, while government officials fretted over the potential for unrest. President John F. Kennedy, who had been initially apprehensive about the march, later admitted that it was a triumph of peaceful protest. Yet, behind closed doors, the administration was already bracing for the political fallout, worried that the march might push the civil rights agenda too far, too fast. In the realm of pop culture, the march had an impact that was both immediate and enduring. It was referenced in songs, films, and television shows, becoming a symbol of courage and determination. Even the more cynical corners of the entertainment industry couldn't ignore the narrative appeal of King and his dream. To put it bluntly, if Hollywood had a quota for inspirational material, this event would have filled it. But here's the kicker. While the speech and the march were monumental, they were not panaceas. The harsh reality was that racism and discrimination didn't pack up and leave town after King's speech. If anything, the backlash was a stark reminder of how deep-seated the issues were. King knew that the road ahead would be fraught with obstacles, but he also understood the power of momentum. The March on Washington was a catalyst, a moment when the fight for civil rights became a national conversation that couldn't be ignored. As the day drew to a close, participants returned home, their hearts full of hope and their minds full of resolve. The march had been a success, but the real work was just beginning. King was acutely aware that speeches, no matter how powerful, were merely the starting point. The real test lay in translating words into action, dreams into reality. So, as we leave this chapter in our tale, let's remember that the March on Washington was more than just a gathering of like-minded individuals. It was a turning point in the struggle for equality, a moment when the nation was forced to confront its own conscience. And while King was the face of the movement, it was the collective effort of countless individuals that made it possible. In the end, the march was a testament to the power of unity and a reminder that even the most audacious dreams can become reality when fueled by determination and a little bit of courage. Stay tuned for the next act in this unfolding drama, where we'll delve into the trials and tribulations that followed in the wake of the march. The story is far from over, and trust me, the best is yet to come. The March on Washington may have been a high point, but let's not kid ourselves. Martin Luther King Jr.'s story didn't wrap up with a neat bow after those iconic words echoed across the National Mall. No, the real world doesn't provide tidy resolutions, and King's journey was a masterclass in navigating a sea of complexities, contradictions, and a few too many curveballs. Fast forward to the late 1960s, and King was facing challenges that even his most stirring speeches couldn't easily solve. Now, when you think of Martin Luther King Jr., what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably his stirring calls for racial equality, right? But in the latter part of his career, King shifted gears a bit. He was like a rock band that after a few chart-topping hits decides to go experimental. King started tackling economic inequality, which, let's be honest, isn't the sexiest topic when you're trying to keep a movement energized. But he knew that racial justice and economic justice were two sides of the same coin, and he wasn't about to ignore the economic realities that were shackling millions. Let's talk numbers for a second. By the mid-1960s, more than 20% of Americans lived in poverty, a statistic that was especially grim for African Americans. King saw the economic disparity as a glaring injustice, a systemic failure that was as American as apple pie, if the pie was made of income inequality and served with a side of social unrest. He got vocal about it, launching the Poor People's Campaign in 1967, which aimed to address these disparities head-on. This wasn't just a lofty dream. King had concrete plans, like demanding a $30 billion anti-poverty package, which, for context, was about 4% of the US GDP at the time. But King's pivot to economic issues wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. Some of his former allies were about as enthusiastic as a cat at a swimming lesson. They worried that diluting the focus on racial issues might weaken the movement's core message. King, however, was adamant. He wasn't just fighting for the freedom to sit at any lunch counter, he was fighting for the ability of all people to afford the meal in front of them. Then there was the Vietnam War, a conflict that divided America like a contentious Thanksgiving dinner. King, ever the advocate for peace, couldn't stay silent. In 1967 he delivered his Beyond Vietnam speech at Riverside Church in New York City, and boy did he let it rip. He called the US government the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. Talk about not pulling punches. This speech was a litmus test for King's relationships with political allies. Spoiler, many of them didn't pass. The backlash came in hot and heavy. The media tore into him like a pack of wolves, with publications like The Washington Post declaring he had diminished his usefulness to his cause, his country, his people. Even the NAACP distanced itself, wary of alienating supporters who were less than eager to hear their civil rights hero denounce US foreign policy. But King was steadfast. He believed that the war was draining resources that could be used to tackle poverty, and was disproportionately affecting African Americans who were dying in Vietnam at higher rates. The economic and moral dimensions were inextricably linked in his eyes. King's later speeches lacked the romanticism of the I have a dream era, and they didn't pack the same crowd-pleasing punch. His message was a hard sell, like trying to market kale juice to a bunch of soda enthusiasts. But King wasn't in it for applause, he was in it for change. He understood that the fight for justice was a marathon, not a sprint, and he was prepared to endure the long haul, even if it meant losing popularity points along the way. So here we are, with King wrestling multiple fronts, civil rights, economic disparity, anti-war advocacy, all while facing increasing opposition, even from those who once cheered him on. It's like he was trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope, and the safety net below was looking awfully thin. Yet King remained undeterred. He continued to speak out, even when it felt like he was shouting into the void. His determination was unyielding, grounded in the belief that justice delayed was justice denied. He was acutely aware of the criticisms and the risks, but he also knew that the stakes were too high to back down. And so he pressed on, navigating the turbulent waters with the kind of resolve that would make even the most stoic sea captain nod in approval. As we leave this chapter, it's crucial to recognize that King's later years were a testament to his unwavering commitment to justice in all its forms. He wasn't just a dreamer, he was a doer, and he understood that dreams without action are like a car without wheels, full of potential but going nowhere fast. King's legacy is a complex tapestry woven from threads of courage, conviction, and an unshakable belief that a better world was not only possible but imperative. Stay tuned as we delve into the final stretch of King's journey, where we'll explore the culmination of his efforts and the legacy that continues to inspire generations. The story isn't over yet, and trust me, there's more to come that you won't want to miss. So, as we reach the final stretch of this journey through Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, it's time to shine a flashlight on the shadows of myth and reality that cloak his legacy. King's speeches have been celebrated, quoted, and, let's face it, sometimes cherry-picked more than a basket of ripe summer berries. But what's the reality behind the legend, and why does it still matter today? First, let's tackle the myth that King's "I Have a Dream" speech was the crescendo of his oratory career, and that he spent the rest of his life on cruise control. The truth is, King didn't just hit repeat on his greatest hits tour post-1963. Instead, he confronted thorny issues like economic inequality and the Vietnam War, which were about as popular as a rainstorm at an outdoor wedding. These weren't topics that made headlines for feel-good reasons, but King wasn't in the business of comfort, he was in the business of change. His later speeches, often overshadowed by the grandeur of the Dream speech, were gritty, full of urgency, and aimed at unraveling the complex tapestry of social injustice. King's speeches also became fodder for what I like to call, quote, mining. People, politicians, celebrities, and your well-meaning but occasionally misguided uncle often extract snippets of King's speeches, polishing them like pearls to fit whatever narrative suits their needs. But let's be honest, folks. Cherry-picking King's words while ignoring the broader context is like reading the last page of a novel and claiming you know the whole story. King's message was broad, nuanced, and often uncomfortable. He didn't just dream of racial harmony, he demanded systemic change, which, spoiler alert, is not something you accomplish with a few catchy sound bites. Take, for instance, the overused line about judging people by the content of their character. It's a beautiful sentiment, sure, but King also spoke extensively about the institutional barriers that prevented people from realizing their full potential. He wasn't just waxing poetic on personal virtue, he was calling out structural inequalities that required a societal overhaul. Yet, the romantics loved to snip out the pretty parts, leaving the gritty bits on the cutting room floor. Then there's the legacy of King's economic justice crusade, which often gets the short end of the historical stick. The Poor People's Campaign of 1968 was an ambitious endeavor to address poverty in America, an issue as persistent as a leaky faucet. King recognized that civil rights without economic rights were like a sandwich without the filling. His vision was expansive, advocating for jobs, housing, and a living wage for all Americans. He even planned a mass protest in Washington, D.C., to pressure the government to take meaningful action. Unfortunately, King was assassinated before he could see the campaign through, leaving the initiative to continue without his charismatic leadership. And while we're myth-busting, let's address another common misconception, that King was universally beloved in his time. The reality is, he had more critics than a controversial movie premiere. By 1966, a Gallup poll showed that nearly 2/3 of Americans had an unfavorable view of him. His opposition to the Vietnam War and his focus on poverty were seen as distractions from the civil rights movement by some and outright un-American by others. It's easy to forget the vitriol he faced while comfortably settled in the hindsight of history, where King's image has been sanitized and simplified. The man was complex, his positions controversial, and his vision far-reaching. So why does King's legacy endure, even amidst the myths and misconceptions? It's partly because his speeches offered a blueprint for a better future, one that included everyone at the table, not just a select few. His words have been invoked in countless movements worldwide, from anti-apartheid rallies in South Africa to pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. His message of non-violence and equality is a universal language that transcends time, culture, and borders. But King's lasting influence also stems from his ability to tap into the core of human decency and the universal longing for justice. His speeches weren't just about painting a rosy picture of unity. They were about challenging societies to live up to their moral and ethical potential. King forced America and the world to confront its shortcomings while also providing hope that change was possible. In today's social and political landscape, King's legacy feels particularly resonant. As societies grapple with issues of racial injustice, economic inequality, and political polarization, his ideals provide both a mirror and a map. The mirror reflects the uncomfortable truths we must face, while the map offers a guide to navigate towards a more equitable future. King's words remind us that the fight for justice is never truly over and that complacency is the enemy of progress. And so, as we wrap up this exploration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s impact, it's worth noting that his legacy is not just a monument to the past, but a living testament to the ongoing struggle for a just society. His speeches continue to inspire and provoke, challenging each new generation to dream bigger, act bolder, and demand better. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most enduring legacy of all. Despite popular belief, the Aztecs didn't spend their days worrying about the end of the world, unlike those of us nervously checking our phones for apocalypse alerts every time there's a weird weather pattern. Instead, they were busy organizing their lives around calendars so sophisticated they'd make your smartwatch look like an Etch-a-Sketch. The Aztecs had two main calendars, the Tonalpohualli and Xupohualli, which sound less like calendar names and more like they're part of a spell to summon a dragon. But trust me, these weren't conjuring devices. They were the backbone of Aztec civilization. The Tonalpohualli was the sacred calendar, a 260-day cycle that was a bit like the cosmic version of your daily planner, only with more divine intervention and less coffee stains. It's said to have been divided into 20 periods of 13 days each, which were called tricinas. Each day had its own deity, animal, or element associated with it, making the choice of a good day to do anything from planting maize to planning a battle as intricate as modern algorithms predicting your next online shopping spree. Then there was the Xupohualli, the 365-day solar calendar, which was more like the annual planner hanging on your kitchen wall. If your war calendar could also tell you when it was time for human sacrifices. This calendar was split into 18 months of 20 days each, with an extra 5 unlucky days added on like a cosmic afterthought. During these 5 extra days, known as Nemontomy, the Aztecs believed it was best to avoid doing anything important, not unlike how we treat Mondays. Now, what really made these calendars tick wasn't just their ability to keep track of time, but the way they were woven into the very fabric of Aztec society. Imagine planning your entire life around celestial events. Births, weddings, and even wars were all timed according to these cycles. It wasn't just about the passage of days, it was about ensuring harmony with the universe. The Aztecs didn't just mark time, they lived by it. And let's not forget the political power these calendars held. Leaders used them to legitimize their authority, claiming divine timing for their rule. If you thought your boss's obsession with punctuality was intense, try living under a ruler who could claim the stars themselves endorsed his leadership. Priests, too, wielded significant influence, interpreting the calendars to predict the future and guide decisions, making them ancient equivalents of data analysts with a penchant for human hearts. Speaking of which, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the myth that has as many lives as a cat, the supposed prophecy of the world ending in 2012. The truth is, the Aztecs didn't think the world would end at the conclusion of a calendar cycle. They saw these cycles as periods of renewal, not doom. Think of it as hitting refresh on your browser, not delete. The 2012 doomsday theory was more a product of modern misinterpretation and a good dose of Hollywood drama than anything the Aztecs actually believed. In reality, the Aztecs had a far more nuanced understanding of time than the doomsday enthusiasts give them credit for. Their view of cyclical time was a reflection of their broader cosmology, where everything was interconnected and constantly in motion. They understood that the end of one cycle simply marked the beginning of another, a perspective that's, frankly, more optimistic than most Monday mornings. So, while the modern world might have freaked out about an ancient calendar running out, for the Aztecs, it was just another page turning in the universe's grand diary. They were less concerned with apocalyptic finales and more with making sure their lives were in sync with the divine rhythms. Maybe there's a lesson in there for us, buried somewhere between the cosmic calculations and the sacrifices. After all, If they could juggle such intricate cosmic schedules without losing their heads, metaphorically speaking, we can probably handle our Google calendars. But let's take a break from swirling calendars and dive straight into the Aztecs' astronomical prowess. It's easy to imagine them as ancient stargazers, reclining in the shadow of their grand pyramids, pondering the mysteries of the cosmos like philosophical hipsters. Except, instead of chai lattes, they had obsidian blades, and instead of existential dread, they had a robust understanding of celestial bodies that would make NASA sit up and take notice. First things first, let's talk about Venus, the celestial rock star in the Aztec universe. Known as Tlahuizcalpantecutli to the Aztecs, which, let's be honest, is a mouthful even by ancient standards, Venus was more than just a pretty light in the sky. It was a cosmic clock that informed everything from agriculture to warfare. The Aztecs meticulously tracked its cycles, which they believed heralded major events, much like how we await the latest Apple keynote. They even had a specific calendar known as the Venus Round, an 8-year cycle that aligned with the planet's movements. Imagine coordinating a major military campaign based on the appearance of a planet. Talk about cosmic strategy. Now, Venus wasn't just hanging out solo in the Aztec celestial lineup. The Pleiades, a star cluster you might recognize if you've ever squinted up at a particularly clear night sky, also played a starring role. These stars were the harbinger of the new fire ceremony, a ritual so significant that it makes New Year's Eve look like an ordinary Tuesday. Every 52 years, when the Aztec calendars aligned, they'd look to the Pleiades crossing the zenith at midnight, a confirmation that the world was not, in fact, ending. This ceremony was a bit like hitting the reset button on civilization, complete with torches, sacrifices, and a level of pageantry that would put even the most elaborate Super Bowl halftime show to shame. But how on earth did they achieve such precise astronomical observations without so much as a telescope or a GPS app? This is where their architectural genius comes into play. Enter the Templo Mayor, a structure so finely aligned with celestial events that it essentially functioned as a giant stone calendar. Situated in the heart of Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City, it was aligned with the sun's position during the equinoxes, creating a visual spectacle that probably made the neighbors quite envious. Imagine standing on the steps of this temple, watching the sun rise perfectly between the twin sanctuaries dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god, and Huitzilopochtli, the sun god. It was less about aesthetics and more about ensuring the divine forces were in their corner. This architectural alignment wasn't just for show, it was a key component in synchronizing religious ceremonies with the movements of the heavens. The Aztecs weren't merely building monuments, they were crafting instruments of cosmic order. This precision is akin to our modern-day atomic clocks, except the Aztecs managed it with nothing but their eyes and a profound understanding of the cosmos. No small feat when you consider that we still struggle to set our microwave clocks correctly. So, how did they do it? It's the million-dollar question, and no, they didn't have a secret stash of alien technology. The answer lies in their methodical approach to observation. The Aztecs observed the sky with a dedication rivaling any modern-day astronomer. They constructed observatories and used sighting instruments made from simple materials like sticks and stone. These tools, though rudimentary, were capable of tracking intricate celestial movements with astounding accuracy. The Aztecs were the original DIY astronomers, proving that sometimes the best results come from getting your hands dirty and your eyes skyward. In the grand scheme of things, the Aztecs' astronomical knowledge was not just about tracking stars and planets. It was about weaving these celestial patterns into the fabric of daily life. From planting crops to planning conquests, the movement of the heavens was inextricably linked to earthly affairs. It's a reminder that while we may have traded the stars for smartphones, the quest to find meaning in the cosmos is as old as civilization itself. And just as we marvel at the ingenuity of ancient peoples, it's worth considering how their understanding of the cosmos informs our own. The Aztecs remind us that sometimes the answers to the universe's mysteries are right above us. No telescope required. So next time you find yourself under a starlit sky, remember that you're participating in a tradition as old as time itself. Just maybe leave the sacrifices to the historians. Speaking of starlit skies, let's bring our gaze back down to Earth and talk about the Aztecs' other cosmic skill, agriculture. Now, you might be thinking, how exciting can farming be? Well, strap in, because Aztec agriculture was less about ploughing fields and more like orchestrating a symphony with the cosmos. This was a society that took farm to table to a whole new level, using their astronomical knowledge to time agricultural activities with precision that would make even a Swiss watchmaker nod in approval. The Aztecs weren't just planting seeds, they were conducting an agricultural ballet with the sun, moon, and stars as their choreographers. They recognized the vital role of seasonal cycles and aligned their planting and harvesting activities accordingly. This wasn't just about being in sync with nature. It was an economic masterstroke that supported the sustenance of Tenochtitlan, a metropolis teeming with an estimated 200,000 people. That's right. This city was a bustling hub long before urban sprawl was a thing, rivaling the population of contemporary European cities like Paris and London. Enter the Chinampas, the Aztec answer to the housing crisis of arable land. Think of these as floating gardens. Except they didn't actually float like lily pads. They were more like artificial islands, painstakingly constructed by layering mud and vegetation. These fertile plots transformed the swampy areas of Lake Texcoco into productive farmland. Imagine turning your backyard pool into a vegetable patch that feeds your neighborhood. Not only did this technique maximize agricultural output, but it also ensured a steady supply of food, from staples like maize and beans to exotic treats like tomatoes and avocados. Forget farm to table, this was lake to lunch. Thanks to such innovative gardening, the Aztecs could cater to the hustle and bustle of Tenochtitlan's markets. Ah, the markets, where the city's heart truly beat. Picture bustling squares filled with merchants hawking goods from every corner of the empire, from obsidian blades to cacao beans. These were no ordinary markets. They were the Wall Street of the Aztec world, minus the pinstriped suits and power lunches. Instead, imagine bustling stalls under vibrant awnings, the air thick with the aroma of spices and the energy of commerce. This was where the Aztec economy thrived, a place where trade wasn't just local but interregional, connecting the empire like a web of barter and exchange. But let's not get carried away romanticizing this economic wonderland. The marketplace may have glittered with gold and cacao beans, but it was also underpinned by the less glamorous realities of tribute and taxation. You see, the Aztec economy wasn't just built on the exchange of goods, it was propped up by a formidable tribute system. Conquered regions were required to funnel resources back to the center like tributaries feeding a great river. This wasn't just a gentle nudge to pay your dues, it was an economic juggernaut with lists of demanded goods longer than a CVS receipt. The tribute lists read like a who's who of Mesoamerican commodities, cacao, cotton, feathers, and even human labor. It was an empire built with a delicate balance of trade and, let's be honest, a fair bit of coercion. This wasn't the romanticized barter system of equals, but a hierarchical structure where the Aztec elite benefited most. It's a reminder that while the system was ingenious in its efficiency, it was also brutally effective in its exploitation, kind of like the ancient version of a corporate monopoly. And let's not forget the role of the Pochteca, the professional traders who roamed the empire and beyond, acting as the economic arteries of the Aztec world. These traders weren't just hawking wares, they were the ancient equivalent of international business consultants, negotiating deals, forging alliances, and occasionally dabbling in a bit of espionage on the side. Their journeys took them as far as Central America, establishing trade networks that were as much about politics as they were about commerce. Imagine a world where your local grocer is also a secret agent with a penchant for exotic goods. It was all in a day's work for the Pochteca. Yet, for all this economic vibrancy, life under Aztec rule wasn't a stroll through a sun-drenched marketplace. The burden of tribute fell heavily on the shoulders of conquered peoples, often leading to resentment and unrest. The Aztec economy was a marvel of organization and ingenuity, but it was also a house of cards, vulnerable to the shifting winds of alliance and rebellion. It's a classic case of all that glitters is not gold, a shimmering facade masking the harsh realities beneath. So, while the Aztec scientific prowess fueled an empire of staggering complexity, it wasn't without its darker shades. Their mastery of astronomy and seasonal cycles supported a thriving economy, yet this prosperity was inseparable from the systems of tribute that sustained it. It's a tale of innovation intertwined with exploitation, a reminder that history's great achievements often come with a footnote of human cost. As we dive deeper into the Aztec world, it's essential to appreciate both the brilliance and the brutality that defined their society. The intersection of science, trade, and agriculture wasn't just a testament to their ingenuity, it was a reflection of the broader dynamics that shaped their civilization. And in understanding this, we gain a richer perspective on the forces that propelled the Aztecs to greatness and, ultimately, to their downfall. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's more to explore in this fascinating saga, and the threads of history are far from unraveling. As we delve deeper into the Aztec world, it's clear that their society was a tapestry woven with threads of innovation and power, where science and politics danced an intricate ballet on the grand stage of history. Let's set our sights on the political and social structures that allowed Aztec science to not just exist, but thrive like a well-watered chinampa. First off, forget the idea of a monolithic tyrannical regime where everyone marched to the same drumbeat, eyes set firmly on the sun god. Yes, the Aztec Empire was an expansive, centralized power, but it was also a complex web of alliances, responsibilities, and, dare I say it, political acrobatics that would make modern politicians break a sweat. At the heart of this political ecosystem were the priest astronomers, the rock stars of the Aztec world, who wielded not just celestial charts but considerable clout. These guys weren't just staring at the stars for fun. They were the gatekeepers of cosmic knowledge, interpreting the heavens like a stockbroker reads the market. Their role was pivotal, as they forecasted everything from crop cycles to the most auspicious days for battle, making them a bit like ancient versions of your favorite weather app, but way more influential. These priest astronomers were products of an education system that was as rigorous as it was unique. Picture a society where every child, regardless of social status, had access to education, at least at the start. The Aztecs had schools, Calmacac for the nobility, and Telpotcali for the commoners, where kids learned everything from religion to rhetoric, and yes, even astronomy. Think of it as Hogwarts, but with a curriculum focused on celestial navigation and less on wand-waving. While the Calmacac was an ivy-covered path leading to priesthood or leadership roles, the Telpotcali was more about practical skills and military training. But here's the kicker. Those who showed exceptional talent could cross over from the Telpotcali to the Calmacac, proving that even in a hierarchical society, merit had its place. It's almost like the Aztecs had their own version of the American dream, minus the white picket fences and apple pie. Now, let's talk about the ingenious use of technology that kept this empire rolling. Chinampas, those floating gardens we touched upon earlier, were more than just a clever farming hack. They were a testament to Aztec engineering brilliance. These artificial islands turned the marshy lake beds into fertile grounds, supporting a population explosion in Tenochtitlan that would make modern urban planners gawk in disbelief. The Aztecs essentially terraformed their environment, creating a sustainable food source that fed their sprawling metropolis. But the Chinampas weren't just about food. They were an early example of sustainable agriculture that modern-day green warriors would applaud. The Aztecs rotated crops, maintained soil fertility by dredging nutrient-rich silt from the lake bottom, and even had a built-in irrigation system. In short, the Aztecs were practicing permaculture before it was cool, all while balancing their divine calendar and appeasing the gods. Now, let's tackle the myth of the Aztec Empire as a purely tyrannical regime. Sure, the Aztecs had their fair share of blood and spectacle. Human sacrifices weren't exactly PR-friendly, but to paint them solely as despotic is to miss the forest for the obsidian blades. The Aztec political system was a delicate dance of power-sharing among the triple alliance of Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. It was less about one ruler's iron fist and more about a collaborative juggle of governance, which, frankly, would make a modern coalition government look like a cakewalk. This alliance was a clever political strategy to maintain control over a vast and diverse empire. Each city-state had its autonomy, and the emperor, or Huey Tlatoani, was more of a first among equals, leveraging consensus to keep things running smoothly. This wasn't tyranny, it was a sophisticated system of checks and balances where the emperor had to play the political game with finesse, balancing the needs of the nobility with those of the common folk. Of course, let's not sugarcoat it, This system worked as long as everyone played by the rules, which were often etched in stone and occasionally in blood. Tribute was the glue that held this empire together, and while it fostered economic growth, it also sowed the seeds of dissent among the conquered peoples. The Aztecs' ability to maintain their empire hinged on a constant balancing act, not just of celestial bodies, but of political alliances and social contracts. In the grand tapestry of history, the Aztecs stand out as a civilization that thrived not because of brute force alone, but through an impressive synthesis of science, politics, and culture. Their ability to weave these elements together speaks to a level of sophistication that defies the simplistic narratives often peddled about them. So, as we journey through the annals of the Aztec Empire, it's worth remembering that their story is as much about the stars they admired as it is about the earth they cultivated. They were visionaries with their eyes set on the cosmos and their feet planted firmly on the ground, balancing the divine and the mundane with a grace that rivals the celestial bodies they so revered. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover in this saga of cosmic intrigue and earthly power plays. The threads of the Aztec story are still unraveling, and as we peel back the layers, we'll find more lessons hidden in the folds of history, lessons that echo through time with a resonance that's hard to ignore. So, just when you thought the Aztec story couldn't get any more fascinating, let's shift gears and reflect on the legacy they've left us. It's a tale of celestial calculations and chinampas, an ancient science that still resonates in today's pixelated world. Start with their astronomical techniques. The Aztecs, those original cosmic influencers, showed an uncanny knack for tracking celestial bodies without the aid of any modern tech. They were churning out sky charts while most of Europe was still trying to figure out how to bathe regularly. Their ability to predict solar and lunar eclipses, for instance, was not some ancient magic trick, but a testament to their observational precision and understanding of celestial cycles. This legacy of celestial navigation rippled through history like a cosmic stone tossed into a pond, inspiring future astronomers to look up and wonder. Fast forward a few centuries, and you'll find that the very concept of cyclical time, so central to the Aztec worldview, has found a comfy seat in our modern understanding of sustainability. Think about it. The idea that time isn't just a straight line to oblivion, but more of a loop, a chance for renewal and regeneration. It's a perspective that aligns quite nicely with our contemporary commitment to sustainability, now that we've realized Earth isn't just a never-ending buffet of resources. The Aztecs understood that life was about balance, sowing and reaping, resting and laboring. They knew that over-exploitation led to ruin, a lesson we're still trying to wrap our heads around as we navigate climate change and resource depletion. Now, speaking of natural resources, let's pay homage to those ingenious chinampas. These agricultural marvels were the Aztecs' answer to the modern-day vertical farm. They were a sustainable solution long before sustainables became the buzzword of the 21st century. By transforming swampy lakes into fertile plots, the Aztecs created a blueprint for urban agriculture that we're only now starting to explore seriously. In a world grappling with food security, their methods provide a historical roadmap to feeding growing populations with limited space. It's a reminder that sometimes the best solutions are the ones that have been around the longest, just waiting for us to rediscover them. But let's not get too misty-eyed over the Aztec scientific prowess without acknowledging the elephant in the room, the myths that have stubbornly clung to their legacy. Yes, the gruesome tales of human sacrifice and apocalyptic prophecies have overshadowed their genuine contributions to science and agriculture. It's the classic case of sensationalism winning out over substance. Who needs facts when you can have a juicy narrative about heart-ripping rituals, right? But while this blood-soaked image makes for an exciting story, it's a disservice to the complexity and achievements of Aztec civilization. Consider the irony. A society that was so forward-thinking in its environmental practices and cosmic calculations is often reduced to caricatures of brutality and superstition. It's like praising Da Vinci for his doodles while ignoring the Mona Lisa. The Aztecs deserve better than to be pigeonholed as mere villains in a historical drama. Their real legacy lies in their understanding of the universe and the earth. A legacy that, if we let it, can teach us a lot more about ourselves and our place in the cosmos. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour of the Aztec world, it's crucial to remember that history isn't just a collection of bedtime stories or cautionary tales. It's a mirror, reflecting our own potential and pitfalls. The Aztecs, with their celestial insights and agricultural innovations, remind us that human ingenuity has always been the key to overcoming challenges, whether it's predicting the next eclipse or ensuring the next harvest. So next time you set your smartphone's calendar or marvel at urban farming, give a nod to the Aztecs. They were the original timekeepers and earth tenders, balancing the cosmic and the practical with a deftness we can still learn from. In the end, the Aztec story isn't just about their accomplishments or their myths. It's about the enduring human spirit to explore, to innovate, and to find harmony with the world around us. And if there's one takeaway from their saga, it's that history is a complex tapestry of triumphs and tragedies, a lesson in the art of living wisely in a world that's both unpredictable and profoundly interconnected. As history buffs, we're not just spectators but participants in the ongoing narrative of human ingenuity. So let's keep asking questions, challenging myths, and uncovering the truths that lie beneath the surface. Because, as the Aztecs have shown, the answers we seek might just be written in the stars. Carthage, a city that practically oozed salt and sea spray, was the undisputed maritime heavyweight of its time. Nestled comfortably on what we now call the Tunisian coast, Carthage had more than just a love affair with the Mediterranean, it had a full-blown obsession. If you wanted to control the ancient world, you needed a killer navy, and the Carthaginians were the Beyoncé of naval power, always on top, setting trends and leaving everyone else trying to catch up. Their geographical setting was nothing short of a strategic jackpot. Perched on the northern tip of Africa, Carthage had its eyes set firmly on the Mediterranean Sea, the ultimate aquatic superhighway of ancient commerce and conflict. It was like owning the best piece of real estate in Monopoly. It came with both immense opportunity and the promise of constant battles with greedy neighbours. And so, it was only logical that Carthage invested heavily in its naval fleet, turning their city into an unsinkable maritime fortress. Now, when it comes to their ships, the Carthaginians weren't just building boats, they were crafting the sports cars of the sea. Enter the bireme, a sleek, double-decked rowing machine that was the pride of the Carthaginian navy. But these weren't just any vessels. They were built with the kind of meticulous care and attention to detail that would make a modern luxury car manufacturer blush. According to ancient records, constructing a bireme required a small forest worth of timber, hefty chunks of bronze, and more manpower than it takes to organize a family reunion. Speaking of manpower, let's talk logistics. Building a bireme was less about slapping together a couple of planks, and more like hosting a medieval version of a corporate team-building exercise. You needed carpenters, blacksmiths, weavers, and a good number of strong backs to row the thing once it was in the water. A typical bireme would employ around 200 rowers, which meant you weren't just building a ship, you were creating a floating village. And let's not forget the cost. Depending on the size and complexity, a bireme might set the Carthaginian treasury back a cool 10,000 drachmas. An eye-watering sum in a world where a skilled labourer earned about 1 drachma a day. It's safe to say that each bireme was a floating investment, a testament to Carthage's commitment to dominating the waves. As for the materials, the Carthaginians didn't just grab whatever wood was lying around, they sourced the finest Lebanese cedar, a wood so prized it was practically the ancient equivalent of carbon fibre. These trees were felled, transported, and then transformed into the sturdy frames and sleek hulls of the biremes. Add in a touch of bronze for the rams and fittings, and you had a ship that was as deadly as it was beautiful. But let's not romanticize the process too much. Ancient shipbuilding was less about artistry and more about brute force. Picture hundreds of workers toiling under the scorching sun, hammering, sawing, and cursing their way through the construction process. It's a wonder they didn't stage a mutiny before the ships ever hit the water. And why did they go through all this trouble? Simply put, naval supremacy was the lifeblood of Carthage. With it, they could control trade routes, project power, and defend against the numerous enemies that seemed to pop up like weeds around the Mediterranean. In a world where the sea was as much a battlefield as the land, having a top-tier navy was akin to holding the keys to the kingdom. So, there you have it. Carthage wasn't just about fancy ships and strategic genius. It was a testament to what can be achieved with a bit of geographical luck, a lot of ambition, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. As we dive deeper into the naval tactics of this ancient powerhouse, remember, Carthage didn't just ride the waves, they commanded them. While Carthage was busy flexing its naval muscles, the Romans were across the pond, scratching their chins and pondering how to knock this maritime titan off its pedestal. Let's dive into the tactical playbook that made Carthaginian admirals the talk of the ancient town, and how they tried to stay one step ahead, or at least afloat, of their Roman adversaries. First, let's talk about the corvus. No, not the bird. This was the ancient equivalent of a gangplank with attitude. Picture a massive wooden contraption that looked like a long, unwieldy beak. This piece of equipment, allegedly inspired by Roman innovation, wasn't exactly the darling of the Carthaginian fleet. The corvus was designed to latch onto enemy ships, allowing Roman soldiers to board and turn a naval battle into a good old-fashioned brawl. It was the horror movie of maritime warfare, the monster that turned the sea into a wrestling ring. The Carthaginians, not ones to be outdone, had to rethink their tactics. You see, the line formation was their bread and butter. This strategy involved arranging ships in a tight line, ready to swoop in and strike like a pack of wolves. It was all about speed, coordination, and ramming prowess. With their sleek biremes, Carthaginian admirals could execute this maneuver with the kind of precision that would make a drill sergeant weep with joy. But the corvus threw a wrench, or rather a spike, into the works. Faced with these Roman innovations, the Carthaginians had to adapt, and fast. They couldn't just rely on ramming anymore. It was like telling a modern racing team they couldn't use their engines. Carthage needed a plan B, and they came up with a few creative solutions. One was to avoid the corvus altogether by engaging in naval battles in rough seas where boarding was trickier. Another was to beef up their own boarding parties, turning the tables on the Romans with a taste of their medicine. Each attempt was a balancing act between maintaining traditional strengths and embracing new strategies. Now, speaking of facepalms, the Battle of Cape Ecnomus in 256 BCE was a moment that could make any Carthaginian strategist want to toss their helmet overboard. This battle, one of the largest naval engagements in history, saw the Carthaginian fleet going toe-to-toe with the Romans. Things started off well enough, with Carthage's nimble ships doing their dance on the waves, but as the battle unfolded, the Romans demonstrated that they had learned a thing or two from their Carthaginian counterparts. The corvus proved to be a game-changer yet again, and the Carthaginian fleet found itself outmaneuvered and outgunned. Despite being outnumbered, the Romans managed to turn the tide, quite literally capturing 24 Carthaginian ships. The battle was a bitter pill for Carthage to swallow. It was like watching your favourite sports team fumble the ball at the last minute, leaving fans groaning and shaking their heads in disbelief. The painstakingly crafted biremes, the pride of Carthage, were being upstaged by Roman ingenuity and brute force. But let's not be too harsh on the Carthaginians. They were nothing if not resilient. Each defeat was a learning experience, albeit an expensive one. With each loss, they went back to the drawing board, tweaking their strategies and refining their techniques. The line formation might have been their initial go-to, but adaptability became their watchword. It was a bitter reminder that sometimes the best-laid plans of admirals and kings can be sunk by a well-placed spike. And here's the kicker. Despite these setbacks, Carthage remained a formidable naval power. The Romans might have had their moments of glory, but Carthage was still the queen of the Mediterranean chessboard, strategizing, plotting, and always ready for the next big move. Their story is a testament to the fact that even the mightiest can stumble. But true greatness lies in how you pick yourself up and charge back into the fray. In the grand tapestry of history, Carthage's naval tactics showcase the eternal dance between innovation and tradition, between bold new strategies and the tried and tested. The saga of their maritime exploits is far from over, and as we continue to explore their storied past, remember, Carthage wasn't just fighting battles, they were writing the rulebook of naval warfare, one corvus-clad encounter at a time. With Carthage still licking its wounds from Ecnomus, you'd think they'd be hesitant to dive back into the fray. But the ancient world wasn't one for sitting idly by while your enemies sharpen their swords, or in this case, polish their rams. Enter the Battle of Drepana in 249 BCE, a naval clash that promised all the drama of a Hollywood blockbuster, complete with plot twists, nail-biting suspense, and an ending that left everyone talking. Now, let's set the stage. The Roman fleet, still riding high on their previous victories, decided to throw caution and their ships to the wind by blockading Lilybaeum, a key Carthaginian stronghold in Sicily. This was Rome's way of saying, "We've got you cornered." But if Carthage had taught Rome anything, it was that they weren't the kind to let a little thing like a blockade ruin their day. Enter Carthaginian Admiral Adherbal, no relation to any fast food chains, who was as cunning as he was bold. Adherbal knew that a direct confrontation with the Roman fleet was tantamount to poking a very angry bear. Instead, he opted for deception, which, in the world of naval warfare, is just as good as power. Rather than charging headfirst into Roman waters like some testosterone-driven toga party, Adherbal took a detour. By hugging the coast and timing his movements with the cover of darkness, he managed to slip his fleet past the Roman blockade undetected. It was the ancient equivalent of sneaking past the bouncer into a club you're not supposed to be in. The Romans, confident in their naval superiority, were caught off guard. They scrambled to respond, but by then the Carthaginian fleet was already in open water, ready to unleash their carefully planned counterattack. Now, here's where things get really spicy. The Roman admiral Publius Claudius Pulcher, clearly not a believer in omens, famously ignored a particular one involving sacred chickens. Yes, you heard that right, chickens. In Roman tradition, the sacred chickens were supposed to eat before a battle, a sign of divine favor. When they refused, Pulcher, in a fit of hubris, tossed them overboard, quipping, "If they won't eat, let them drink." Spoiler alert, the gods were not amused. As the two fleets clashed, the Carthaginian ships took advantage of their greater maneuverability. They darted in and out like mosquitoes, striking the Romans where they least expected. The Romans, still adjusting to this new form of naval combat, found themselves outflanked and outsmarted. The result? A resounding Carthaginian victory. Pulcher's fleet was decimated, losing about 93 out of 120 ships, a staggering blow to Roman naval ambitions. The economic cost was astronomical, with each trireme costing upwards of 30,000 denarii. The political fallout? Even worse. Pulcher returned to Rome not as a war hero, but as a scapegoat, facing trial for sacrilege and negligence. But let's not sugarcoat it. While the Carthaginians celebrated, they were acutely aware of the high stakes. Each ship lost wasn't just wood and bronze. It was blood, sweat, and tears, not to mention a hefty chunk of the Carthaginian treasury. The cost of naval warfare was a constant reminder that victories were fleeting, and the sea could be as much a friend as a foe. The pressure was always on to maintain their naval edge, which meant continuous investment in ships, training, and strategy. Moreover, the ancient PR machine was in full swing. Carthage needed to capitalize on their success, not just militarily but also politically. They needed to show their allies and enemies alike that they were still the undisputed rulers of the waves. Propaganda wasn't just for the modern world, it was alive and well in Carthage, with tales of their naval prowess spreading far and wide. Each victory was a testament to their resilience, their adaptability, and their sheer will to remain at the top of the maritime food chain. In the grand chess game of the ancient Mediterranean, Drepana was a crucial move. It showed that Carthage could still outmaneuver Rome, adapting their tactics and leveraging their strengths in innovative ways. But it also underscored the immense resources required to maintain such a powerful navy. Every success was hard-won, and every loss was a reminder of the precarious balance of power. As we set sail further into the annals of Carthaginian naval history, remember that these battles were more than just clashes of ships and men. They were the culmination of strategic brilliance, economic might, and political maneuvering. The Mediterranean was their stage, and Carthage was determined to remain its star player no matter the cost. But the story's far from over, and what happens next will continue to shape the destiny of this ancient maritime powerhouse. But let's pump the brakes on this cruise through Carthaginian triumph and talk about some of their not-so-glorious moments, shall we? You see, the myth of Carthage's naval invincibility is like that urban legend about the alligator in the sewer, exciting, but not exactly the whole truth. Carthage wasn't just riding a wave of endless victories, they hit their fair share of sandbars too. Take the Battle of the Agates Islands in 2421 BCE. Picture this. It's the final showdown of the First Punic War, a conflict that had already dragged on longer than a bad marriage. The Carthaginians, with their supposedly unbeatable fleet, squared off against the Romans once more. But this time, the tables turned dramatically. In a twist worthy of a plot twist meme, it was the Romans who had learned from their past defeats. They had overhauled their fleet, stripping down their heavy ships for speed and maneuverability, and crucially, they had improved their seamanship. The Carthaginians, perhaps a bit too comfortable in their belief that the sea was their friend, found themselves outmaneuvered and outsmarted. In a battle that showcased more strategy than brute force, the Romans managed to sink 50 Carthaginian ships and capture 70 more, with a staggering 10,000 Carthaginian sailors taken prisoner. It was the kind of catastrophic loss that could ruin your day, or, an entire empire's naval supremacy. The defeat at the Agates Islands forced Carthage to sue for peace, marking the end of the First Punic War. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and a stark reminder that even the most formidable of fleets could be sunk by complacency and underestimation of the enemy. Now, let's shift gears from the chaos of battle to the calm. Well, relatively speaking, life on board a Carthaginian ship. It wasn't all about ramming speed and war cries. These sailors were also the unsung heroes of ancient commerce. Imagine the Mediterranean not just as a battleground, but as the ancient world's busiest freeway, with Carthaginian ships serving as the semi-trucks hauling everything from olive oil to purple dye. These sailors were the ultimate multitaskers. Warriors, traders, and explorers rolled into one. They navigated the choppy waters of trade routes with the precision of a modern GPS, only they relied on stars, winds, and gut instinct. And let's not forget the cargo. We're talking amphorae stuffed with wine, oil, grain, and exotic goods that would make a modern-day hipster farmer's market look tame. Life on board wasn't exactly a luxury cruise, though. Imagine cramped quarters, the smell of tar and salt water, and the kind of camaraderie that comes from knowing your life depends on the guy rowing next to you, not keeling over. The food? Let's just say it was more about survival than a Michelin star experience. Your average sailor likely subsisted on a diet of hardtack and whatever fish they could catch, washed down with watered-down wine because, let's face it, fresh water was as scarce as a Roman defeat. The truth is, these sailors were as much diplomats as they were deckhands. They brought tales of distant lands back to Carthage, helping to weave a network of trade and cultural exchange that spanned the Mediterranean. And while the Carthaginian navy might have been the Beyoncé of the maritime world, their sailors were more like the roadies, critical to the show, even if they didn't always get the spotlight. But hold on. Let's not romanticize these maritime adventures too much. The life of the sailor was fraught with peril. Storms could whip up faster than a Carthaginian admiral could shout, "All hands on deck," and piracy was less a risk and more an occupational hazard. Yet, the allure of the sea, its promise of wealth, adventure, and the occasional battle, kept these sailors coming back for more. In the grand tapestry of Carthaginian history, their navy wasn't just a fleet of warships, it was a floating testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the relentless quest for dominance. Every ship that set sail was a gamble, a bet that the sea's rewards would outweigh its dangers. And while the legends of Carthaginian invincibility may have been overstated, their legacy sails on, a reminder that even the mightiest empires have their off days. As we continue to navigate the complex waters of Carthaginian maritime history, keep in mind that the real story is always more nuanced than the myth. Carthage was more than just a naval power. It was a hub of trade and exploration, with sailors who were as comfortable haggling in a foreign port as they were manning the oars during battle. The sea was their stage, and every journey a new chapter in the ever-evolving saga of human ambition and adventure. Stay tuned, because the next wave of history is just around the corner, and it's bound to make a splash. Now, let's cast our eyes back to when Carthage's maritime prowess started to slip through its fingers like sand in a leaky hourglass. You see, the decline of Carthaginian naval power wasn't just a sudden shipwreck, it was more like a slow leak in an empire's lifeboat, exacerbated by a mix of economic strain, political turmoil, and a touch of good old-fashioned Roman persistence. First up, the economic strain. Carthage's war machine wasn't just fueled by ambition and sea salt, it was powered by a hefty pile of silver and gold. Maintaining a navy that could dominate the Mediterranean wasn't a budget-friendly affair. We're talking about a financial commitment that could make a modern defense budget look like pocket change. The costs of building, maintaining, and manning their formidable fleet were astronomical. Each bireme, an ancient Rolls-Royce of the sea, required a small fortune in resources and manpower. And remember those skilled rowers and craftsmen? They didn't work for free. The expense of keeping such a vast naval force afloat meant that Carthage's coffers were perpetually under strain. Now, sprinkle in a dash of political turbulence. The Carthaginian government wasn't exactly a paragon of stability. It was a republic, sure, but one with a penchant for internal strife and factionalism. The city's politics were as stormy as the Mediterranean in winter, with wealthy merchant families and political elites jockeying for power. This internal squabbling often spilled over into military decisions, leading to inconsistent leadership and strategy. When you're trying to fend off Roman advances, having a divided command is about as helpful as a rudder on a camel. And then there was Rome. Oh, Rome, the insistent fly in Carthage's ointment. While Carthage was busy dealing with its internal dramas, Rome was playing the long game, refining its naval capabilities and learning from its losses. They were the Rocky Balboa of the ancient world, knocked down but never out. Rome's ability to learn, adapt and innovate was nothing short of impressive. By the time the Second Punic War rolled around, the Romans had transformed from maritime novices to seasoned sea wolves, ready to give Carthage a run for its money. One of the defining moments in this downward spiral was the Battle of Zama in 22 BCE. This wasn't a naval battle, but it was the knockout punch that sent Carthage reeling. Hannibal, the Carthaginian general with a knack for audacious tactics, faced off against Scipio Africanus, a Roman commander whose tactical genius was matched only by his ambition. Despite Hannibal's brilliance, the Romans emerged victorious. The defeat at Zama forced Carthage to sign a peace treaty that severely limited its military power, and that included its once proud navy. Carthage's naval decline wasn't just about ships and sailors, it was a reflection of shifting power dynamics in the Mediterranean. The city that once controlled the seas like a maritime puppet master found itself hemmed in by the rising Roman tide. Carthage was forced to cede territory, pay hefty reparations, and dismantle much of its fleet. The financial burden of these reparations was staggering, draining Carthage's economy like a slow bleed. It was a classic case of death by 1,000 cuts, with each concession and payment further crippling Carthage's ability to project power. But let's not close the book on Carthage just yet. Even in decline, the city retained a certain mystique. The legends of its naval dominance lingered, whispered across the ancient world like tales of Atlantis. Carthage's maritime achievements were so impressive that they became the stuff of legend, romanticized and mythologized by those who heard them. The idea of a city that could command the seas, harnessing the power of the waves to build an empire, was too tantalizing to let go. It's the kind of story that survives the ages, long after the ships have sunk and the ports have fallen silent. In a way, the myths of Carthage's navy are a testament to human nature's love affair with the sea. There's something inherently romantic about the idea of a people who could conquer the waves, turning the sea into both a weapon and a wealth of opportunity. It's a narrative that resonates with our sense of adventure, ambition, and the eternal struggle against the odds. The reality, of course, was far grittier. Carthage's sailors weren't mythical heroes. They were men of flesh and blood, battling not just the elements but also the harsh realities of war, trade, and survival. As we look back on Carthage's maritime saga, it's clear that its legacy is a blend of myth and reality. The city that once ruled the Mediterranean didn't simply vanish. It left ripples that would influence naval warfare for centuries to come. Carthage's innovations, from the bireme to their strategic maneuvers, laid the groundwork for future maritime empires. Even in defeat, Carthage taught the world valuable lessons about resilience and the price of ambition. So, as we tie a bow on this historical journey across Carthage's naval exploits, let's remember that the sea has always been both a mirror and a muse. It reflects the best and worst of human endeavour, from the heights of innovation to the depths of hubris. Carthage's story is a testament to the power of the sea to shape history and the enduring allure of the legends it inspires. As we let the waves of history recede, we find that the echoes of Carthage's ships still linger, a reminder that even the mightiest can be undone, but their stories never truly sink. You're mourning in 1st century Sectus Iphon, the bustling heart of the Parthian Empire, kicks off with the sun barely peeking over the horizon. You hear the bleating of sheep and the clamour of merchants setting up their stalls, each hoping to outshout the other in the cacophonous symphony of the bazaar. As a merchant yourself, you know that today isn't just about making a sale. It's about survival in a world where the phrase trade route is synonymous with lifeline. The bazaar is a sensory overload of sights and smells, a chaotic dance of camels, spices, and yes, occasionally, a camel that smells like it's being dragged through every dusty road from here to the Silk Road itself. Speaking of silk, let's clear something up. While everyone loves to romanticize the idea of trading in the finest Chinese silks, the reality is a bit grittier. Sure, silk is part of your repertoire, but so are sacks of grain, pottery, and, oddly enough, some dried fish that never seem to sell despite your best haggling efforts. Your first stop is to check on your caravan, those gloriously stubborn camels that are the backbone of your trade operation. You've got about 20 of these beasts, each capable of carrying 500 pounds of goods across the desert. That's roughly the weight of a modern grand piano, if you're curious. Although no one's crazy enough to trade those here, the camels are your lifeblood, and you've heard enough tales of bandits and sandstorms to know that each journey they complete is nothing short of a minor miracle. Now, let's talk money, because we all know that even in ancient Persia, it's what makes the world, or at least your world, go round. Ctesiphon is a melting pot of currencies, with merchants from as far as Rome and India bartering their goods. The drachm, a silver coin from Greece, is the currency of choice, but you've got to keep your wits about you. Exchange rates fluctuate faster than a mirage in the midday sun, and one false move could leave you with a pocket full of worthless coins. You've seen more than one merchant fall prey to this economic sleight of hand, left holding a bag of shiny metal that's about as valuable as the sand it came from. As you stroll past the stalls, you catch snippets of conversation in languages you barely recognize. There's a Roman trader boasting about his latest acquisition, a set of Venetian glassware that'll probably shatter before it reaches its destination. Next to him, an Indian spice merchant is haggling over the price of saffron, the so-called red gold of the ancient world. You nod politely, but keep moving, knowing full well that while saffron might spice up a meal, it won't fill your belly. But let's not forget the unsung hero of the trade world, dates. Yes, those sticky, sweet fruits are not only a staple of your diet, but also a hot commodity. While silk and spices get all the glory, dates are what keep your fellow traders going on those long, dusty treks. Don't be fooled by their humble appearance. A sack of premium dates can fetch a high price, provided you can convince your buyer they're not just glorified desert candy. You pause to exchange pleasantries with a fellow merchant, a trader in fine carpets. He's just returned from a trip to Bactria and is eager to share tales of his journey over a cup of watered-down wine. You listen, half-interested, as he regales you with stories of narrow mountain passes and treacherous river crossings. It's a familiar tale, one you've heard 100 times, but you nod along, recognizing the shared camaraderie of those who brave the roads in search of profit. The conversation shifts to politics, as it invariably does in these gatherings. The Parthian Empire, with its vast territory stretching from the Euphrates to the Indus, is a patchwork of cultures and languages. The Arsacid kings rule with a loose grip, allowing local satraps, think ancient governors, to manage their own affairs. It's a system that works, mostly, though you can't help but wonder how long it'll last. The Romans are always sniffing around the edges, eager to expand their own empire at the expense of yours. But enough of politics for now. There's business to attend to. You haggle over a shipment of ceramics from the east, knowing that these delicate pieces are always in demand among the wealthiest citizens of Ctesiphon. After a few rounds of back and forth, you reach a deal that leaves both parties feeling like they've pulled one over on the other, a sure sign of a successful negotiation. As the sun climbs higher, the temperature in the bazaar rises, and so does the pace. There's a constant ebb and flow of people, goods, and gossip. You overhear a rumor that the latest shipment of silk from China was waylaid by bandits somewhere near the Taklamakan desert. It's a reminder that every trade route is fraught with danger, and fortune favors the bold or the well-armed. Your thoughts drift to the wider world as you consider the sprawling network of trade routes that connect Ctesiphon to the farthest reaches of the known world. The Silk Road is more than just a highway for goods. It's a conduit for ideas, cultures, and yes, even diseases. You remember hearing about a mysterious illness sweeping through the Han Empire, and you can't help but wonder if it'll make its way here. It's a sobering reminder that the same roads that bring wealth can also carry ruin. By midday, you're ready for a break. You retreat to a shaded corner of the bazaar where a vendor is selling flatbread and a type of cheese that smells suspiciously like the camels you've been tending all morning. It's not gourmet, but it's filling, and you savor the momentary respite from the chaos around you. As you eat, you reflect on the life you've chosen. Being a merchant in Ctesiphon isn't for the faint of heart. The rewards can be great, but so are the risks. You've seen friends and competitors alike fall victim to everything from dishonest partners to the dreaded tax collectors who seem to have a sixth sense for finding coins you thought well hidden. But then there are the days when everything falls into place, when the goods arrive on time, the deals go smoothly, and you walk away with a profit that makes the hardships worthwhile. It's these moments that keep you coming back, that make you wake up each morning ready to face whatever the bazaar throws your way. As the afternoon wears on, you return to your stall, ready to close out the day's business. You've got a few more deals to finalize, a couple of outstanding debts to collect, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to catch a bit of gossip that'll give you an edge in tomorrow's negotiations. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the marketplace. The crowds thin out, and the noise subsides to a dull roar. You take a moment to savor the relative quiet, knowing that tomorrow the cycle will begin anew. As you pack up your wares and prepare to head home, you can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. You've survived another day in the life of a Parthian merchant, navigating the bustling bazaars of Ctesiphon with all the skill and tenacity of a seasoned trader. It's a life of constant hustle and occasional triumph, where every day is an opportunity to prove yourself anew. And as you make your way through the winding streets, you know that whatever tomorrow brings, you'll be ready to meet it head-on. As the last rays of sunlight dip below the horizon, you can feel the city of Ctesiphon exhale, like a weary traveller finally dropping their load. But while the marketplace might be winding down, the real business of the Parthian Empire is just getting started. You see, here in the heart of Persia, the wheels of commerce never truly stop spinning, much like those stubborn camels of yours that seem to have an endless loop of energy. Let's talk about the grand chessboard that is the Parthian Empire. Stretching from the Euphrates all the way to the Indus River, it's a vast expanse that would make even the most ambitious real estate mogul blush. But unlike a modern-day corporation with a centralized CEO barking orders, the Parthian system is more laissez-faire, shall we say. The Arsacid dynasty, with its line of kings, rules with a grip as loose as a silk glove. They prefer to let local governors, known as satraps, run their own shows. It's like an ancient version of a franchise business model. Everyone operates independently, but they're all still part of the same brand. And speaking of brands, let's dive into Parthia's reputation as the Rome of the East. Ah yes, the Roman Empire. Everyone's favourite ancient juggernaut. But while the Romans might have been strutting around in their togas, conquering anything that moved, Parthia had a different strategy. They didn't need to conquer land with legions, they conquered markets with merchants. The Silk Road, that legendary trade route, was their battlefield, and they wielded commerce as deftly as any Roman wielded a sword. You're probably picturing this Silk Road as some glamorous thoroughfare lined with exotic goods and mystical travellers. Well, here's the reality check. It's more like a network of dusty paths where traders like you play a constant game of dodge the bandit and prey. The camels don't spit. But the allure of silk, spices, and other luxuries kept the caravans moving, driven by the promise of profit. The Silk Road was less a road and more a sprawling web, connecting places like China, India, and the Mediterranean, with Ctesiphon right in the middle, a veritable crossroads of the ancient world. Now, let's clear up the misconception that Parthia was some kind of imitation. Rome. Sure, they borrowed a few Roman ideas. Public baths, anyone? But the Parthians were distinctly their own beast. Their army might not have been as flashy as Rome's, but their cavalry? Pure poetry in motion. They perfected the Parthian shot, the technique where horse archers would feign retreat and then turn to shoot while riding away. It was ancient warfare's version of a mic drop. But back to the economics of it all. The Parthian economy was a patchwork of currencies, much like the bazaar from earlier today. The drachm was a popular choice, but let's not forget the denarius and the tetradrachm, each coin reflecting the vast array of cultures within the empire. This currency cocktail made trade both exciting and terrifying. One wrong pouch of coins, and you could end up with a currency that's not worth the metal it's minted on. While the Silk Road gets all the glory, it's the local trade that keeps the day-to-day life humming. The Parthian Empire is a kaleidoscope of cultures and goods, and each region has its own specialties. From the famed carpets of Bactria to the fine pottery of Susa, the diversity of products is staggering. And let's not forget those dates, still the unsung heroes of the Parthian pantry. Politically, the Parthian Empire is a delicate balancing act. The Arsacid kings have to navigate a landscape filled with powerful satraps, each with their own ambitions and grievances. It's like an endless game of political chess, except here the pieces occasionally try to stab you in the back. And then there's Rome, always looming on the western horizon, like a nosy neighbour who can't resist peeking over the fence. The Parthians and Romans have been playing a decades-long game of cat and mouse, with boundaries shifting like the sands of the desert. Every so often, a particularly ambitious Roman general will decide it's his turn to try and conquer the east. But the Parthians have a knack for strategic retreats and surprise counterattacks that leave the Romans scratching their helmeted heads. It's a geopolitical dance that would put even the most seasoned diplomat to shame. So, as you watch the sun finally disappear behind the horizon, casting the city in shades of twilight, you can't help but marvel at this vast empire. It's a world where trade is the heartbeat and politics the pulse. A place where merchants like you are the unsung heroes, navigating the economic tides with a mixture of cunning and courage. As you make your way back through the labyrinthine streets of Ctesiphon, you pass by the grand halls and modest homes, each a testament to the diversity and complexity of this ancient society. And while the Parthian Empire might be hailed as the Rome of the East, you know that it's not simply an echo of another empire. It's a unique blend, a world where East meets West, and where the rhythm of commerce is the true ruler. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, and the bazaar will come alive once more, a tapestry of voices and colours, of hopes and dreams. And you'll be there, ready to dive back into the fray, to haggle and barter with the best of them. Because in this world of shifting sands and uncertain futures, one thing remains constant, the indomitable spirit of the Parthian merchant, always on the move, always seeking the next great opportunity. Speaking of the indomitable spirit, let's roll up our sleeves and dive into the social fabric of Parthian society. It's a tapestry as complex as one of those Bactrian carpets. The Parthian Empire is like a grand dinner party where everyone's invited, but not everyone gets to sit at the table. You've got your nobility, who are living the ancient equivalent of the celebrity lifestyle, complete with grand feasts and enough bling to make a magpie swoon. Then there's folks like you, the merchants, the tireless middlemen who keep the economy humming along, much like the persistent buzz of flies over a market stall. Now, let's bust some myths about this supposedly unified empire. Spoiler alert, it's about as unified as a bag of mixed nuts. The Parthian Empire is a patchwork quilt of cultures, each region clinging to its own traditions like a toddler with a favourite toy. Sure, everyone's nominally under the rule of the Arsacid kings, but in reality, local satraps, think of them as the local influencers of their day, are the ones calling the shots. These satraps are power players in their own right, with enough autonomy to make a cat herder look like a micromanager. The satraps have the unenviable job of keeping their provinces in line while also keeping the king happy. It's a tightrope walk worthy of a circus performer, except instead of applause, there's the constant risk of political assassination. And while we're on the subject, let's not romanticize these satraps as benevolent rulers. Many of them have a penchant for taxing the life out of their subjects, leaving the average farmer feeling about as cherished as a flea on a camel. But let's not forget about the nobility, the real main characters of this ancient drama. These aristocrats, known as the Aztecs, live in a world of opulence where everyone knows their place, and the pecking order is as rigid as a centurion's armour. The Aztecs own vast tracts of land, which they lord over like real estate moguls with a divine right complex. They hold sway in the king's court and have enough influence to make even the most ambitious satrap think twice before crossing them. Meanwhile, you, the merchant, navigate this social hierarchy with all the finesse of a snake charmer. You might not have a title or a sprawling estate, but you've got something the nobility covets: access to goods and, more importantly, to information. In a world where knowledge is as valuable as gold, your position offers a unique kind of power. You hear the whispers in the bazaar long before they reach the ears of the noble class, giving you an edge that money can't always buy. And then there's the rest of society, the artisans, farmers and labourers who form the backbone of the empire. These are the people who toil away daily. Their lives are testament to the harsh realities of ancient life. The artisans, with their skilled hands, craft everything from pottery to weapons, their creations a blend of practicality and artistry. Farmers work the land with a diligence that's both admirable and necessary, their livelihoods tied to the whims of weather and the demands of their feudal lords. Local tensions simmer beneath the surface, a constant undercurrent in this sea of diversity. Ethnic and cultural differences can create friction, especially in border regions where different tribes and languages coexist, like guests at a tense family reunion. And while the empire might project an image of strength and unity, the reality is that each region is a world unto itself, with its own customs, beliefs, and grievances. So, what does this mean for someone like you? Well, it's both a challenge and an opportunity. Navigating these social layers requires a keen understanding of who holds the real power and how to leverage your position to your advantage. You learn to read people as well as you read the stars, identifying potential allies and knowing when to steer clear of those who might see you as a stepping stone, or worse, a threat. As you weave through the bustling streets of Ctesiphon, you're acutely aware of these dynamics. Every interaction is a dance, a careful balancing act where one misstep could cost you everything. But therein lies the thrill, the chance to rise above your station, to outwit those who underestimate you because of your lack of noble blood. After all, in a world where the rules are written by the powerful, the trick is to learn how to play the game better than they do. And speaking of games, let's not overlook the role of the military in this grand societal structure. The Parthian army is a formidable force, largely thanks to its heavy cavalry, the cataphracts, who are the ancient equivalent of a modern-day tank. These heavily armoured riders, with their gleaming armour and imposing steeds, strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. It's said that a single charge from these warriors can turn the tide of a battle, a testament to their prowess and the empire's military strategy. But while the cataphracts are the poster boys of Parthian warfare, don't discount the importance of the light cavalry and foot soldiers. These troops, often drawn from the lower classes, are the unsung heroes of the battlefield, their contributions as vital as the more glamorous cavalry charges. It's a reminder that in war, as in life, every role is critical, and even the smallest cog can keep the machine running. As you ponder these layers of society, the afternoon sun begins its descent, casting long shadows that stretch across the city. The marketplace, once a cacophony of noise and colour, starts to quiet down, the vendors packing up their wares and the last of the customers making their way home. It's a time of transition, a moment to reflect on the day's events and consider the broader picture. In this sprawling empire, where the past and present collide in a vibrant tapestry, you find yourself at the heart of it all. A merchant, a trader, a vital link in the chain that connects cultures and economies. While you may not have the noble blood that opens doors with ease, you possess something far more valuable. A resourcefulness and adaptability that allows you to thrive in a world that's constantly shifting, like sand dunes in a desert wind. As the sun dips below the horizon, you find yourself thinking about the future, your future, the future of the empire, and the roles you all play in this grand historical drama. Will the Parthian Empire continue to flourish, or will it fall prey to the internal divisions that threaten to tear it apart? What new opportunities and challenges await on the horizon? These are the questions that occupy your thoughts as you make your way home, your footsteps echoing in the quiet streets. But for now, it's time to rest, to gather your strength for another day of haggling and strategizing in the ever-turning wheel of Parthian commerce. Because in this empire of contrasts, where wealth and poverty, power and subservience coexist, the only constant is change. And as a Parthian merchant, you wouldn't have it any other way. As you settle in for the night, thoughts of tomorrow's trade escapades blend with the flickering shadows on your walls. The life of a Parthian merchant is a constant balancing act, juggling not just goods, but also the delicate connections that stretch across the known world. Maintaining these links is akin to weaving a vast tapestry with threads spun from ambition, luck, and sheer grit. And trust me, those threads fray more often than not. Let's dive into the logistical headache that is long-distance trade in the 1st century. Forget the romantic notion of the Silk Road as some ancient autobahn. It's more akin to a maze of dirt paths with a side of existential dread. The famed Silk Road is a 4,000-mile stretch of back-breaking labour and endless uncertainty. You might have a caravan of camels, but the reality is that each journey feels more like a slow-motion chase scene with the Grim Reaper constantly peering over your shoulder. First, there's the ever-present threat of bandits. These aren't your charming Robin Hood types. No, these are the kind who relieve you of your goods and your dignity in one fell swoop. Legends abound about notorious bandit leaders with names that send shivers down your spine, like the Scourge of the Steppe. Their modus operandi involves swooping down from the hills faster than you can say help, making off with your precious silk and leaving you with a sob story and a lighter load. It's said that a well-armed caravan is a safer caravan, but hiring guards costs a pretty drachm, and there's always the chance those guards might switch sides faster than you can blink. Even if you manage to dodge the bandits, you've still got nature herself to contend with. Rugged mountain passes and unforgiving deserts are less scenic routes and more survival challenges. The Taklamakan Desert, ominously nicknamed the Sea of Death, is a prime example. It's a place where the sun seems determined to bake you into a human raisin, and the only water sources are few and far between. Crossing it is like participating in an endurance race, where your prize is simply making it out alive. And let's not forget the linguistic gymnastics required to conduct business across such diverse lands. The Silk Road is a melting pot of languages, from Persian and Greek to Chinese, and more dialects than you can wave a papyrus scroll at. Picture this. You're trying to negotiate a deal for a shipment of silk, but the buyer speaks a dialect that's as foreign to you as the concept of a tax-free day. Misunderstandings are as common as sandstorms, and one wrong word can turn a promising deal into a diplomatic incident. Speaking of taxes, oh, the joy of rogue tax collectors. Picture a bureaucrat with the charm of a wet rag and the persistence of a camel in mating season. These guys pop up unexpectedly, demanding their pound of flesh, or in this case, a significant chunk of your profits. It's not enough that you've already risked life and limb to get your goods this far. You also have to navigate a labyrinth of tolls and tariffs that make modern tax codes look like child's play. Each region seems to have its own rules, and heaven help you if you don't have the right paperwork. You've heard tales of merchants who spent more time haggling with tax collectors than they did with their actual customers. But it's not all doom and gloom on the trade routes. Despite the challenges, the rewards can be as dazzling as a desert sunrise. Silk, that shimmering symbol of luxury, is worth its weight in gold, or more accurately, its weight in drachms. A single bolt of silk can fetch a price that makes the risk of the journey almost seem worth it. And it's not just silk. Spices, precious stones and exotic goods flow through the veins of the Silk Road, each transaction a testament to the enduring human spirit and the eternal quest for profit. Yet, beneath the glittering veneer of commerce, lies the harsh reality of labour. The labourers who load and unload the caravans, the camel handlers who coax their stubborn chargers across the desert, and the innkeepers who provide weary travellers with a modicum of comfort. They are the unsung heroes of the Silk Road. Their toil is as relentless as the sun, and their stories often go untold amidst the tales of fortunes won and lost. So, as you sit in your humble abode, contemplating the trials and triumphs of trade, you're reminded that the Silk Road is more than just a highway for goods. It's a lifeline for cultures, ideas, and people. It's a reminder that in a world as vast and unpredictable as this, the only certainty is change. And with change comes opportunity for those bold enough to seize it. Tomorrow, as you prepare to face the bazaar once more, you'll carry with you the knowledge of these challenges and the determination to overcome them. The road ahead may be fraught with danger, but it's also paved with the potential for greatness. And as a Parthian merchant, you wouldn't have it any other way. As you drift into contemplation, the far-reaching impact of Parthian trade networks comes into sharper focus, like the intricate patterns of a Bactrian carpet woven across centuries. The Parthian Empire, that sprawling giant of antiquity, wasn't just a landmass on a map. It was a dynamic hub of commerce that bridged east and west with threads of silk, spice, and human ambition. This wasn't just about moving goods, it was about moving ideas, cultures, and economies, shaping them in ways that even you, a seasoned merchant, might find hard to fully grasp. Let's take a moment to appreciate the scope. Trade routes like the Silk Road weren't solitary paths, but a web of interconnected highways stretching over 4,000 miles, linking places like Chang'an in China to Antioch in the Roman Empire. Imagine the distance, about as far as a modern flight from New York to Berlin, except with more camels and fewer in-flight snacks. These routes weren't just about luxury items either. Sure, silk was the headliner, but the supporting cast included everything from saffron to lapis lazuli, each item charting a course through history. Economically, the Parthian trade networks were the beating heart of the empire, pumping prosperity into its veins. By facilitating the flow of goods, the Parthians boosted local economies and increased wealth, not just in their own lands, but in every market their caravans touched. Ctesiphon, your home turf, was the ultimate beneficiary. A bustling metropolis where the sound of commerce was as constant as the Tigris flowing nearby. This city didn't just thrive, it exploded with life, its population swelling like the sails of a ship catching the wind of fortune. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The romantic image of the Parthian Empire as an idyllic crossroads of culture and commerce is, well, a bit of a mirage. The reality? A complex patchwork of political intrigue and regional tensions, much like a marketplace at closing time chaotic, with everyone trying to get the best deal before the shutters come down. The Arsacid kings, those silk-gloved rulers, had to juggle not just economic growth, but also the delicate balance of power between local satraps and neighbouring threats. It's like trying to keep a caravan on course in the middle of a sandstorm. And speaking of threats, let's not overlook the Romans. Ah, the Romans, never content to mind their own business. They saw the Parthian Empire as both a rival and an opportunity, a place to flex their military muscle and expand their own trade networks. Yet, despite their best efforts, the Parthians held their ground, not with sheer force, but with strategic diplomacy and a few well-placed arrows from their famed cavalry. It's a testament to their resilience that the Parthian Empire remained a thorn in Rome's side for centuries, a constant reminder that not everyone was eager to be swallowed by the Roman machine. But what about the cultural impact? Trade wasn't just about the exchange of goods, it was about the exchange of ideas. As caravans trundled along those dusty roads, they carried more than silk and spices. They ferried philosophies, technologies, and religious beliefs across borders. Buddhism, for example, made its way from India to China, while Zoroastrianism spread its influence westward. The Parthians, sitting at the crossroads of these exchanges, absorbed and contributed to a cultural melting pot that would shape the world for centuries to come. And yet, for all the empire's influence, there's a tendency to romanticize its decline as a tragic fall from grace. The truth is less poetic. The Parthian Empire, like any great entity, was vulnerable to the same forces that fueled its rise: internal strife, economic shifts, and the relentless march of time. By the 3rd century, the Sasanian dynasty rose to prominence, toppling the Arsacids with a mixture of military might and political savvy. It was a regime change that felt more like a boardroom coup than a dramatic overthrow, underscoring the fact that even the mightiest empires are ultimately mortal. As night falls and you prepare to rest, let's raise a metaphorical blast to the unsung heroes of this grand historical saga, the camels. These creatures, with their knobby knees and grumpy dispositions, were the true backbone of Parthian trade. Each camel could haul up to 500 pounds of goods. Imagine lugging around a baby grand piano through the scorching desert, and you'll get the picture. These ships of the desert navigated treacherous terrains with an uncanny ability to endure the harshest conditions, all while maintaining a look of perpetual disdain. In a world where human ambition often outpaces its means, camels were the steadfast partners that kept the wheels of commerce turning. They didn't seek glory, just the occasional date or sip of water, yet their contribution to the rise and fall of empires was monumental. So next time you marvel at the wonders of ancient trade, remember the humble camel, soldiering on with civilization perched on its hump. And there you have it, dear merchant, a whirlwind tour of the Parthian Empire's trade legacy. As you drift off to sleep, ponder this. In a world constantly reshaped by the ebb and flow of commerce, it's the stories of resilience, resourcefulness, and, yes, the occasional grumpy camel that remind us of our shared human journey. Tomorrow, as the sun rises over Ctesiphon, you'll be ready to step back into the bazaar, armed with the knowledge that you're part of a legacy that stretches beyond the horizon. Sleep well, for the road ahead is long, but the rewards are worth every dusty mile. Roosters. Nature's alarm clock, and your first reminder that the day isn't going to wait for you. You're in 18th century Zulu land, and those birds don't care that you stayed up late pondering the intricacies of medicinal herbs. Nope. They're crowing like it's their personal mission to make sure you, the Zulu healer, are up and at 'em. And trust me, being a healer isn't all about mystical vibes and lightning-struck enlightenment. It's more about the nitty-gritty of day-to-day life, where knowledge of local flora can mean the difference between a life saved and a day wasted. Now, let's debunk a juicy myth right off the bat. No, you didn't wake up one day with mystical powers because a lightning bolt decided to give you a cosmic high five. The truth is, becoming a healer in your community is less about supernatural gifts and more about good old-fashioned education. You've trained under the elders, learning everything from the medicinal properties of the wild aloe to the social intricacies of the Zulu hierarchy. This education isn't just about healing, it's about survival. The Zulu community is a well-oiled machine with a clear pecking order, where everyone has a role to play. Your job? To keep people alive and healthy, and maybe snag a little social cred while you're at it. But don't be fooled into thinking this is some cushy gig. The respect you earn is hard-won, and your reputation is as fragile as the eggs your neighbour's chickens are laying. Speaking of breakfast, let's talk about what's on the menu. Forget your modern-day cereal and milk. We're talking about a hearty bowl of cocoa, a crumbly porridge made from maize. It's the kind of meal that sticks to your ribs and gets you through the morning hustle. If you're lucky, you might even have some sour milk to wash it down. Delicious, right? Well, maybe not by today's culinary standards, but back then, it's all about sustenance and energy for a long day ahead. As you chow down, let's take a look around. Daily life in the Zulu kingdom is a complex tapestry of duty, tradition, and social maneuvering. The king, or Isilo, is the big boss around here, ruling over a society where every action counts. You've got to understand the subtleties of the social contracts in place. Who gets what, who owes whom, and how you fit into this grand scheme. Being a healer means you're a bit of a social chameleon. You need to maintain relationships with everyone, from the warriors who defend the homestead to the women who manage the households and tend the gardens. Your ability to heal isn't just a skill, it's a currency that buys you respect and loyalty. But here's the kicker, one botched treatment, and you might as well start considering a career change. After breakfast, it's time to get to work. Your first task is to check on the stock of medicinal plants. You're not just grabbing random leaves and roots here, you've got an encyclopedic knowledge of the local flora. Whether it's the fever-busting power of the wormwood or the stomach-soothing properties of the wild ginger, you know what each plant can do, how to prepare it, and when it's running low. And let's not forget the economic angle. You're not a charity, you're a vital part of the community's economy. Your services are invaluable, and in return, you might receive goods like cattle or produce, depending on what's on offer and who's in need. It's a barter system that keeps everyone invested in your success or failure. As you wrap up your morning preparations, you're reminded that this isn't just about healing bodies. It's about maintaining balance. In a world where the social structure is as rigid as a spear shaft, your role provides a kind of social glue. You're the one who bridges the gap between the living and the spiritual, the healthy and the ailing. And while it might not come with a flashy title or a corner office, it's a role that's as essential as the air you breathe. So, you step out of your hut, ready to face whatever the day throws at you. Because in the world of a Zulu healer, every day is a test, and every moment is an opportunity to prove your worth. And who knows, maybe today's the day you'll finally get the hang of that new herbal remedy. Or maybe you'll just end up with another rooster crowing at an ungodly hour tomorrow morning. Either way, it's all part of the job. Stepping out into the morning light, you're greeted by the vibrant tapestry of the village coming to life. The scene is a bustling hub of activity, with everyone playing their part like a well-rehearsed ensemble. As a healer, you're something of a celebrity around here. Not the kind that gets mobbed by fans, mind you, but the kind that people nod to with a mix of respect and curiosity. You carry a certain mystique, a blend of science and soul that keeps people guessing. Now, Let's tackle the economic side of your life because, spoiler alert, it's not all prestige and potions. The romantic notion that you're rolling in cattle and living the good life? Yeah, not quite the reality. While people might assume you're swimming in wealth, the truth is that the life of a healer is as much about economics as it is about empathy. Gathering medicinal herbs is no walk in the park. It requires knowledge, time, and sometimes a bit of luck. Take the aloe, for example. You don't just pluck this miracle plant from the nearest patch of land. Oh no, you have to trek a good 5 kilometers to the right spot where the soil has just the right balance of minerals to cultivate its healing properties. And since you can't exactly put a price tag on health, the barter system is your bread and butter. In exchange for your remedies, you might receive a few chickens, a basket of maize, or, if you're really fortunate, a goat. Not quite a cattle empire, but enough to keep you in business and your belly full. And let's not forget the hidden costs. The time spent learning which herbs cure what isn't just a leisurely afternoon stroll through the fields. It's years of apprenticeship under the watchful eyes of elders who've been around the block a few times. There's a reason you're the go-to for ailments of all kinds, because you've put in the hours, the sweat, and, let's be honest, the occasional tears when a treatment doesn't pan out as expected. But here's where it gets spicy. On top of your role as a healer, there's the whole political landscape to navigate. You see, healers often double as advisors to chieftains. It's a role that's as tricky as it is prestigious. Imagine being called upon to offer wisdom during a tribal council meeting. You're not just dealing with herbs anymore, you're diving headfirst into the murky waters of diplomacy and power dynamics. The chieftain might rely on your counsel when deciding whether to ally with a neighboring tribe or go to war over some disputed grazing land. This advisory role doesn't just impact your standing, it's a high-wire act of epic proportions. One wrong word, and you could find yourself on the outs with the powers that be. But strike the right chord, and you not only solidify your position but also gain invaluable allies. It's a delicate dance, requiring the kind of finesse that would make a diplomat blush. And let's face it, in a world where alliances can shift with the wind, having the ear of the chieftain isn't just a perk, it's a lifeline. Now, you might think that being a healer-advisor combo would come with a few perks, like maybe a reserved seat at the village feast or a slightly bigger hut. But alas, the perks are more intangible. Respect? Absolutely. Influence? Sure, in spades. But tangible rewards? Not so much. You're still bartering your skills for goods, still trekking those 5 kilometers for aloe, and still waking up to the rooster's relentless crowing. As you wander through the village, you can't help but notice the subtle shifts in people's gazes as you pass by. It's a mix of admiration, expectation, and perhaps a hint of envy. After all, not everyone gets to play such a vital role in the community, but with great power comes great responsibility, and all that jazz. Your reputation is constantly on the line. One false step, and the whispers could start, questioning your abilities, your knowledge, even your intentions. But hey, no pressure, right? It's all part of the job. And as you move from one task to the next, whether it's gathering herbs, advising the chieftain, or simply lending an ear to those in need, you realize that the real reward isn't in the goats or the grain. It's in the knowledge that you're making a difference. In a world where life can be as unpredictable as a summer storm, you're the constant, the steady hand that helps guide your people through the chaos. So, as you navigate the bustling village, juggling your roles with deft precision, you're reminded that being a healer isn't just about curing ailments. It's about healing the community, one person, one problem, one day at a time. And who knows, maybe tomorrow you'll finally crack that new herbal remedy. Or maybe you'll just end up with another rooster crowing at an ungodly hour. Either way, it's all part of the adventure. Just when you think you've got the day all figured out, the universe throws a curveball your way, like a neighbor barging in with panic written all over their face. It's not the first time someone's come running to you in a crisis. After all, that's part of the gig when you're the local miracle worker. But today there's a twist. A mysterious ailment is sweeping through the village, and you're the first responder on scene. Now, before you go imagining a dramatic scene with shamanistic chants and mystical dances, let's set the record straight. The true magic here? It's all about plants and a hefty dose of common sense. The Zulu medical practices of the 18th century are less about waving around a magic wand and more about having a green thumb paired with a sharp mind. You start with the basics. First up is the mighty African potato, Hypoxis hemerocalidea, if you want to get fancy with Latin. It's not actually a potato, but it punches above its botanical weight class when it comes to boosting the immune system. This isn't some old wives' tale. The plant is loaded with sterols and glycosides, which modern science tells us might actually help the body fight off infections. But let's not kid ourselves. This isn't an infomercial wonder cure. It's more like a supportive sidekick. Next, you move on to the ever-reliable wormwood, or as you know it, Artemisia afra. This herb has been the Zulu answer to fevers long before it became the darling of the global herbal medicine community. It's got natural anti-inflammatory properties, which makes it a no-brainer for tackling fever and pain. A sip of wormwood infusion might not taste like a day at the beach, but when you're burning up, you're not exactly in a position to be picky. But here's where things get a little wacky. Some of the more colourful treatments from the past include using animal parts, like powdered rhinoceros horn, believed to have potent healing properties. Sorry to burst the bubble, but there's zero scientific backing for that one. It's more likely to deplete your wallet or barter goods than cure anything. Yet it's easy to see why such myths persisted. When you're facing the unknown, a little bit of magical thinking can feel like a life raft. In this particular crisis, you're hearing whispers of stomach issues and fatigue, which means you might be dealing with something as simple as a dietary mishap or as complex as a virus. The cure? Wild ginger or Siphonoculus ethiopicus. Known for its ability to settle upset stomachs and its antimicrobial properties, it's the closest thing you've got to a go-to fix. And while it's not a cure-all, it's a solid choice to help ease the symptoms while the body gets to work on healing itself. But here's the real kicker. As you prepare these remedies, it's not just about the herbs. The social fabric of the village is woven into every step. Medicine isn't administered in isolation, it's a communal affair. You've got neighbours gathering around, offering support, sharing resources, and even pitching in with their own knowledge. It's like a mobile medical conference, complete with impromptu debates and the occasional unsolicited advice. This kind of communal approach to healthcare isn't just a quaint cultural footnote, it's a necessity. In a world without pharmacies or hospitals, the village itself becomes a living, breathing support network. Everyone knows that illness affects not just the individual, but the community at large. If one person falls, others must step in to keep the wheels turning. And let's not forget the economic side of this healthcare system. You're not running a charity here, your herbal remedies are a valuable commodity. The barter system kicks in, with families offering up chickens, grain, or labour in exchange for your expertise. This transactional approach ensures that you can keep your stock of medicinal plants replenished and your household running. It's a delicate balance of giving and receiving, of maintaining social ties while ensuring that everyone gets what they need. As the sun climbs high in the sky, casting long shadows and stoking the day's heat, you can't help but reflect on the nature of your work. You're a healer, sure, but you're also a connector, a facilitator of the village's social and economic systems. Your role is a testament to the Zulu belief in Ubuntu, the idea that I am because we are. It's a worldview that sees the individual as part of a larger whole, where personal well-being is intimately tied to the health of the community. And as you hand over your carefully prepared remedies, you realize that this is what it's all about. It's not just about curing ailments, it's about fostering resilience, about ensuring that the village can weather any storm that comes its way. Whether it's a mysterious illness or a particularly stubborn rooster, you're there on the front lines, playing your part in the grand, ongoing narrative of life. So, as you watch the villagers rally around the ailing neighbour, offering their support and sharing their strength, you can't help but feel a swell of pride. It's moments like these that remind you why you do what you do. Because in a world where uncertainty is the only certainty, the real magic isn't in the herbs or the rituals, it's in the community, in the bonds that hold it all together, and in the steadfast belief that, together, you can face anything. And just like that, the day's tempo shifts. The village is a symphony of life, and you're the conductor who deftly guides its rhythm. But the afternoon, it cranks up the stakes. Into the council meeting. A gathering that makes your herbal remedies seem like child's play by comparison. Here, the stakes are as high as the mountains framing your Zulu kingdom. We're talking about decisions that could alter the course of history, or at least your little corner of it. Now, don't go picturing some Hollywood-esque tribal council with dramatic pauses and ominous drum beats. This isn't a set piece from a blockbuster, it's a gathering of minds, each with a stake in the game. The chieftain, or Inkosi, presides over this assembly, and you? Well, you're not just another face in the crowd. Your role as a healer has earned you a seat at this table, and it's not just for your prowess with plants. In the Zulu world, a healer isn't merely a fixer of bones and banisher of fevers. No, your influence stretches far beyond the physical realm. It's your insight into the spiritual and social fabric of the community that makes your voice as valuable as gold, and sometimes even cattle. You're consulted on everything from alliances with neighboring tribes to the feasibility of launching a cattle raid. It's not just about who's got the bigger spear, it's about who's got the savvier strategy. Take, for instance, the ever-pressing issue of alliances. Zululand, in the 18th century, is a veritable chessboard of shifting loyalties and power plays. Should the village align with the Kwabe, whose grazing lands are enviably vast? Or perhaps forge closer ties with the Umkambi, who are renowned for their formidable warriors? Your role here isn't just to nod wisely and blend herbs, you're weighing in on matters of survival. And here's where it gets spicy. The mystique surrounding healers often paints them as these all-seeing, all-knowing figures, like they've got a hotline to some celestial wisdom. But let's debunk that myth right here. Your insights are grounded in years of observing human nature, understanding the ebb and flow of village politics, and maybe a dash of good old-fashioned intuition. Sorry to burst the bubble, but there's no magic crystal ball involved, just a lifetime of learning and a keen eye for the subtleties of human behavior. Now, let's talk warfare, because, believe it or not, this is where your skills really shine. The chieftain might have the final say, but your counsel could be the difference between victory and a very long, awkward retreat. You're not just advising on fighting techniques, you're offering perspectives on troop morale, the health of the warriors, and the spiritual readiness of the community. A well-timed ritual or an invigoration draft could bolster the warriors' spirits and tip the scales in your favor. And while we're on the subject, let's not ignore the temptation to use your standing for a little personal gain. It's human nature to leverage what you've got, after all. Some healers have been known to, shall we say, embellish their abilities for a bit of extra clout. Why not suggest that the new alliance should include a certain herd of cattle as part of the deal? After all, those allotreks won't fund themselves. But here's the kicker. Your reputation is your currency, and it's a fragile one at that. One slip, one failed prediction, or misguided advice, and you could find yourself as popular as a rainstorm at a wedding. It's a high-wire act, balancing on the knife edge of respect and skepticism, and every decision you make is scrutinized by eyes both admiring and envious. Now, back to those myths. Hollywood loves to portray healers as mystical figures, shrouded in secrecy and capable of feats that defy explanation. In reality, your life is a grind of daily responsibilities and the occasional flash of insight. It's about understanding the human condition and leveraging your knowledge to help navigate the complexities of tribal politics. The allure of the mystical is undeniable, but the truth is both less glamorous and more profound. It's about pragmatism wrapped in the cloak of tradition and belief. As the council meeting wraps up, you've successfully navigated the treacherous waters of diplomacy, offering your insights into alliances, warfare, and the social contracts that bind your community together. You've played your part in the grand chess game of tribal politics, where every piece matters and every move counts. As the afternoon sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the village, you can't help but reflect on the weight of your role. You're not just a healer of bodies, but a healer of rifts, a mender of social threads that hold the fabric of your community together. It's a role that's both exhausting and exhilarating, requiring a blend of wisdom, cunning, and a touch of audacity. So, as you step out of the council meeting and back into the world of herbal remedies, you know that the day isn't over yet. There are still people to heal, alliances to ponder, and maybe, just maybe, a new herbal concoction to perfect. And while the Hollywood version of your life might be filled with dramatic flair and mystical elements, the reality is far richer. It's a life of service and strategy, of healing and high-stakes decisions where every day brings new challenges and opportunities. And who knows, maybe tomorrow you'll finally crack the secret to that elusive remedy. Or maybe you'll just wake up to another rooster, crowing at an ungodly hour, reminding you that in the life of a Zulu healer, the work is never truly done. As the council meeting's energy dissipates and the village settles into the rhythm of evening, your role as a Zulu healer transitions from public advisor to solitary thinker. The sun's descent paints the sky in hues that even the most cynical heart would find hard to dismiss. It's the kind of scene that might inspire a poet, or at least make you momentarily forget the ever-looming rooster problem. This is your time to reflect, not just on the day, but on the legacy you're crafting and how it fits into the larger tapestry of history. Let's not kid ourselves. The life of a healer has been romanticized more times than a Hollywood rom-com. The truth is, it's less glamorous than the stories suggest and more akin to a relentless juggling act. Sure, healers are often cast as mystical figures, but the reality is a gritty mix of botany, sociology, and the occasional need for a diplomatic poker face. It's like being the village's very own Swiss Army knife, always on call to fix whatever's broken. But why are these figures so fascinating? Simple. They're the embodiment of survival. They symbolize a community's resilience against the odds, a kind of living testament to human ingenuity. And that prestige isn't just about personal glory, it's a vital part of cultural identity. Healers are the keepers of knowledge passed down through generations, a lineage that traces back to the whispers of ancestors long gone. You're not just practicing medicine, you're preserving a culture. However, let's not forget the darker side of this legacy. While the romantic image of the healer persists, the historical truth involves more than a few shadowy corners. Take the vilification that often accompanied the role. When treatments failed, healers were sometimes scapegoated, their reputations as fragile as a spider's web in a storm. It's a harsh reminder that the line between revered sage and outcast is thin and often dictated by forces beyond your control. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and the perception of Zulu healers still swings between extremes. Modern society, with its penchant for categorizing everything from coffee orders to cultural roles, often struggles to understand the complexity of the healer's place in traditional society. Are they spiritual guides, medical practitioners, or historical relics? The answer, of course, is all of the above, and none. They're complex figures who defy simple definitions, much like the cultures they represent. But why does this matter today? Well, in a world that often steamrolls over tradition in the name of progress, the role of the healer is a reminder of the importance of cultural preservation. It's a call to remember that not all wisdom comes with a barcode or a prescription label. This isn't just about keeping old practices alive for the sake of nostalgia. It's about understanding that these practices offer a worldview where community health is intertwined with cultural health. As the evening deepens, your thoughts inevitably wander to the future. The 18th century was a time of rapid change, with European colonial powers looming on the horizon like a bad storm. You can almost feel the undercurrents of this impending shift. The question isn't if life will change, but how drastically, and what will happen to the role of the healer in this new world order. Will traditional knowledge hold its ground against the tide of Western medicine? Or will it be swept away, leaving only traces in the sands of time? It's easy to romanticize the past as a simpler time, but the truth is, each era has its own challenges, its own battles to fight. The key is adaptation, not nostalgia. History has shown that those who survive aren't the strongest or the smartest, but the most adaptable. This rings true for cultures as well as individuals. The healer's role will likely evolve, bridging the gap between ancient wisdom and modern practices. The challenge will be to maintain the integrity of this knowledge while adapting to new realities. As you wrap up your day, it's worth pondering the legacy you'll leave behind. Will future generations remember you as a pivotal figure in their history, or just another name in a long list of healers? It's a sobering thought, but it's also a call to action. The choices you make today will ripple through time, shaping not just your life, but the lives of those who come after you. And as you prepare for sleep, you're reminded that history doesn't belong to the past. It's a living, breathing entity that you're a part of. So, you drift off with a few wry thoughts. Maybe tomorrow will bring a breakthrough in that stubborn remedy, or perhaps just another rooster crowing at the crack of dawn. Either way, you'll be there, ready to face whatever history throws your way, one day at a time.